Hello Friendsies, welcome back to my channel. This is gonna be a long ass video. You better buckle the fuck up. Get a snack, get some beverages. I have my reusable cup. I have my Haunted Mansion mug full of water. I got tissues because I know my nose is gonna run. I don't have a snack, but I did just eat lunch and have a cookie before I started filming this, so I would suggest bringing snacks. This is a special interest of mine. Just like most millennials, I have been playing Sims since probably about 2002, because I didn't get to play it right away when it came out in 2000, the Sims series. And I was very late to getting the first Sims game. I was late to getting The Sims 2. I was late to getting The Sims 3. And I'm incredibly late to playing The Sims 4 because I had beef with it for a long time and now I play it. I've made multiple Sims videos before. If you're subscribed to this channel, not only have I done, I was gonna say am doing, not only have I done a Sims 4 Not So Berry Legacy that is currently on an indefinite hiatus, stopped right in the middle of the fucking challenge too, which is crazy. It might come back one day, but not gonna make any promises. But I've made multiple videos about the Sims series on this channel before because I fucking adore the Sims franchise. But today, I want to make a video that is heavily, let me just get this out of the way first, heavily inspired by Plumbella, specifically her Sims Iceberg video that I have watched at least 20 times. At least 20 sounds right. And is that correct? Is that the correct pronunciation for their account? Who has also made videos like looking at the lore and like bugs and glitches and different aspects of all 4 of the Sims games. Heavily inspired by both of them. But specifically with the Sims Iceberg that Plumbella did a whole video on, there is a part in the Iceberg where it talks about how magic in the Sims series is criminalized by the time of the Sims 1 or 2. And Plumbella says in her video, which I also was like, yeah, wait, you're right. Plumbella says in that video that she is almost certain that she's read or seen a Tumblr post or seen a Reddit thread before talking about the criminalization of magic within the Sims series, but she wasn't able to find the original source of it, so maybe she's just thinking she's seen it and hasn't seen it before. I also was like, wait, no, I've definitely seen that before, but I cannot think of what it was or where it would be. I'm wondering if maybe I'm thinking of, what is it called again? Now I feel bad that I can't remember the name of it because I haven't read it in a while. Fortune and Something, the Sims video. I talked about this story forever ago. It's like a fan-made story about The Sims 2, and I the card will be up here. I'll probably just make a Sims playlist if I haven't already and just link you guys the playlist in this video, Or it's different things through gameplay. So today, my video that I want to do today, and it's going to be a long one, like I said, I want to talk about the history of magic and occults within the gameplay, not necessarily in inspiration surrounding the games or when they were published in events. I want to talk about in-game the history of magic and the occults that exist in The Sims. And I don't want this to be a theory video. I more want it to be an open conversation because I did the same thing. I looked at a Reddit thread and I was trying to find Tumblr posts or anything. And all I can really find about the information of the criminalization of magic is within in-game context and different videos that other Simmers have made. So I don't know for sure if there's connecting lore 100%. That's what I want to do in this video. I want to talk about specifically the connecting lore of occults and magic and aliens and all that stuff, and how maybe try to pin down a timeline and maybe pin down a reason as to why occults and magic are banned and criminalized in the Sim series, in the Sim world, in Sim Nation. So huge shout out to Plumbella and Izzy, like I said, because they are the main inspirations behind this video. But I also have done an incredible amount of research and a couple other things that I would like to note. All of my information and any images that I put on screen pertaining to The Sims and the things I talk about are going to be from The Sims Wiki. Again, this is an open-ended conversation about The Sims if we want to get into game theories and shit. So I'm not this is not an indefinite theory, and if you have information that I missed or didn't share in the video, please feel free to put it in the comments because I'm so interested and I want to see if we can pin down like what happened and why and when. I have kind of a theory at the beginning of this video, so maybe by the end of this video, it will be proven wrong, but I have a theory that witches and aliens are the reason why occults are criminalized and magic is banned. That's my running theory right now based off of the research I've done. Let's get into it. So if you've never played The Sims before, or you do play The Sims, but you're not as in-depth of like the lore and like special interest wise, the lore of The Sims, well, how The Sims came out is obviously they were published The Sims 1, The Sims 2, The Sims 3, The Sims 4. Also, no, I'm not touching The Sims 4 with a 10-foot fucking pole because The Sims 4 completely lacks lore, and the lore that it does have does not connect to the other games. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what new packs. I don't care what new patches. I don't care what new families are added. The Sims 4 does not connect to the original games. So, we're not touching The Sims 4. But those are how the games were published. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chronological. Makes sense, right? When you look at the lore, in-game lore, with like interconnecting families, continuous stories, all of that stuff, worlds being similar from one game to another, possibly the same, the way that works in the timeline of The Sims, and I originally wanted to do this video with like a whiteboard so I could put up like pictures and like point at them with a pointer just like Plumbella did. I wish I could be Plumbella. But the way the timeline of The Sims world works when you're considering like interconnecting stories and ancestors and grandparents and things like that, it goes The Sims 3, The Sims 1, The Sims 2. The jump from The Sims 3 to The Sims 1 is 15 to 25 years, about that range. The jump from The Sims 1 to The Sims 2 is definitely 25 years. Like, that's a proven fact. So from The Sims 3 to The Sims 2 is a 50-year, 55-year difference. Okay? You need to understand that in The Sims 3, with the Supernatural pack, which is what I will be talking about specifically, I meant to say this as well. I'm so sorry. I feel I wrote everything. I literally have 13 pages of notes on The Sims 3 alone. On The Sims 3 alone. I still do not know how to be like concise and like put things in order. I'm all over the place. I am talking about very specific occults throughout this video, and I will be referencing pretty much the same ones throughout all three games. Some of them I won't talk about at all. So again, open-ended conversation. If there's an important part in like the history of Plant Sims that you're like, why didn't you talk about this? It's because I found for my own personal research in my own video that Plant Sims were not relevant as compared to fairies. In The Sims 3, when you have the Supernatural pack, which adds all of the occults except for vampires and aliens came earlier in different packs. Aliens came in seasons and vampires came in late night. But The Sims 3 Supernatural adds the rest of the occults, essentially, and expands on all of the occults. So, like, aliens get new interactions through Supernatural. Vampires get new interactions. You know what I mean? The Sims 3 Supernatural has an entire world separate for occults, and magic is pretty much just like the norm. Like, occults and magic are just the norm. There's just occult Sims like around all of the time. That's just a normal thing. And the overall like mood and like behavior towards occults and supernatural is overall just like fairly pleasant to just like indifferent. There doesn't seem to be a lot of hostility. There's, like, obviously some Sims that have hostility, which I will get a little more into as we get into The Sims 3 specifically. We're starting with The Sims 3, but I need to give this overview because I did the research. I fucking did it, and I need to talk about it. But again, overall, the mood of the Supernatural begins in the Sims storyline in The Sims 3 with just, like, fairly pleasant to indifferent. Again, there's obviously people within the Sim world that just don't care for Supernatural. I need a sip. But that's like true for anything. There's Sims within the Sims universe that don't care for technology. Or like certain types of food. It's just that kind of vibe. But The Sims 3, where the timeline starts for the Sims franchise, like the Sims lore story franchise, everybody's fairly just like, yeah, they exist. But by the time of The Sims 2, which is, again, 50 to 55 years later in the storyline timeline, all occults, including aliens, because they are occults, but they're not magical occults. It's a weird little difference. All occults are criminalized, like looked down upon. They're very hidden. A lot of them act very hostile, like the NPCs specifically. A lot of them act very hostile. Some of them have devolved. Werewolves specifically have devolved. And it's so strange because there's like not really any explanation at all. Aliens have Strangetown in The Sims 2, which we're going to get into The Sims 2 by the end of this video because they're the third segment, because it's the third game in the story timeline. But aliens are so criminalized, and they seem to be only in a town that is like a repurposed, abandoned military base. And there's a lot of like talk of abductions and like essentially kind of like violent acts towards non-occult Sims from aliens specifically. So they're like incredibly criminalized. Witches are specifically in like a hidden world. Vampires are only really in like one location, and some of them like might be dead. It's very odd. Some of the occults don't even exist at all. And like I said, in the form of werewolves, they're completely devolved. They're a very specific like thing, and you can only have your sim be a werewolf through like a very kind of uncomfortable event, in my opinion. So we need to start from the beginning, from The Sims 3, and understand how they existed in The Sims 3 to get to the point of The Sims 2 where what is happening? And that's what we're getting into. So again, The Sims 3 is the beginning of The Sims story timeline. It takes place when very famous Sims in the franchise, which even if you're not familiar with The Sims, absolutely no worries. You can still like this video and enjoy it, obviously. But if you're fans of the series, but you don't know too much of the lore, you might learn something new. So famous Sims, very popular Sims like Bella Goth and Mortimer Goth are children in The Sims 3, and they have, like, Bella has her maiden name, which is, like, Bella Bachelor. You meet, I think they're actually different people, but you meet, Agnes Crumplebottom, and in one of the Sims games in the franchise after Sims 3, it's kind of like her origin story. You understand, you, like, learn who she is, and you kind of figure out why she's like that. One of the towns is Sunset Valley, and it says, like, long before Pleasant View, there was Sunset Valley, and then when you look at The Sims 1, it's very, I don't know if it's, like, 100% canonical or heavily implied that Sunset Valley, like, ends up being Pleasant View, essentially. It talks about, like, the history of the land grabs, and, like, Plumbella has a whole, like, entire history of the land grabs. I've watched that specific entire history of a million times. I find the land grabs fascinating, even if they're capitalist pigs. But, like, Malcolm Landgrab from The Sims 2 is a child in The Sims 3, I think. Yeah? Yeah, that's the Malcolm Landgrab. But that's just it. Sims 3 is the beginning of everything for the story. And the thing with The Sims 3 is it offered you the chance to create most, if not all, of your occult Sims in Creative Sim. Instead of having a normal human sim, whatever we want to call them, instead of having a human sim that you then had to go to lengths to turn into, or could learn magic but wasn't technically a witch, or had to take like certain potions, you could just be a witch from day one, like from the womb, essentially. I don't want to refer to Create a Sim as the womb, but you could start with an occult sim, which I think is like super neat. And I think that also feeds into it's just normal. Like they're just like us. They just can do magic or whatever because you can make them from the start of your game. Okay, this part I will have to be looking at my notes fairly well because there's a lot of points that I want to hit that I don't want to miss. If I do it like this, it's going to block the light. You're going to see the shadow regardless. Just work with me here. So, the supernatural added multiple new skills, a couple new traits, new lifetime wishes, a couple different careers, a couple different lot types and lot rewards. We're going to talk about those because this, again, builds into the world of The Sims 3 where it's just like, yeah, occults are just like around. They're just like, yeah, that's my next door neighbor, Bonehilda. It's very like blasé disinterest in the sense of like, I don't know my next door neighbors that we moved into, but they're like fine, they're not causing me problems. It's the same vibes as the occult, but all of these lead into like the type of world that we're living in that's in The Sims 3. So some of the traits that benefit, well, there were two traits that were added, and they benefit and align with the introduction of occults. It benefits occults in whatever way, whether it's to be a friend to the occults if your sim has one of these traits, or gives you a perfect opportunity to be pestered by the occults, which is fun for them, not for you, but fun for them. So you have Supernatural Fan. It conflicts with the Coward trait, which I think is a very interesting point that the Sims Wikipedia made. They get full enjoyment when interacting with occults. They also get like positive like buffs and everything to make them happier. Can roll the want to become supernatural, which is, did I put 1, which is worth 1,000 lifetime happiness points. So you could roll a want to be an occult, which there are multiple ways to become occults, let alone create a sim. But yeah, and it like rewards you incredible amounts of happiness points to buy other rewards or just like be in a good mood throughout the series, which is so, I love it. I love that The Sims 3 is like the most accepting and happy of the occults. Through my own personal gameplay, The Sims 3 is my favorite to play with occults because I think it has the most to it. Away from the Supernatural Fan, though, is the Supernatural Skeptic. Perform better in business, political, law enforcement, and journalism careers. If you have that trait, you benefit in all of those careers. You do better, you feel better going into those jobs. Listen to that again. Business, political, law enforcement, and journalism. It's right here at the bottom. I think that is interesting. And also concerning. ACAB, you know? Interactions include ask a ghost to move out, complain about all occults, enthuse about witch hunts. That's crazy. Those are things you can do as a supernatural skeptic if you have that trait. That's bizarre. You can enthuse about witch hunts? That's what I mean. There are obviously like, again, there are Sims that are like technophobes that don't like technology. There are Sims that are vegetarians that will not eat meat or fish or anything like that. It's just, it seems, as concerning as those things are, how they can enthuse about a witch hunt and they benefit and do better in like law enforcement and politics, it still is just kind of like a way of living. It doesn't necessarily so far stand as like impeding supernaturals or criminalizing them or criminalizing magic. It's just how it is in The Sims 3. Sims can also have new lifetime wishes, which if you don't know what a lifetime wish is, because they're all called different things in every game. They can't be consistent about anything. So if you're predominantly a Sims 4 player, it's essentially their aspirations, that same vibe. The ultimate goal they aim to accomplish, yeah, so essentially their aspirations. The wishes range from personal growth, benevolent acts for the community growth, to fully evil and or selfish, which again, I feel like is just a variety of humans. Real life people care about benefiting their community, and some of them care about destroying their community. I'm so sorry if the camera angles keep changing. I'm sitting very uncomfortably on my floor right now, and my legs hurt. So I keep kicking the camera by accident. So there's a wide range of how occult Sims would like to live their life. And those lifetime aspirations aren't limited to occult Sims. Like if you have the aspiration to turn the town, but you're not an occult Sim that you're playing with, there are ways for you to do it. You have to turn into a vampire, but you can start with the desire to do vampire things without being a vampire, which I thought was cool. There are also new careers in The Sims 3. The fortune teller career, which is available at the caravan, which comes in the world that you get with The Sims 3, but it's also can be added. And it has the two branches of mystic, which is really cool, you know, in touch with your magic, in touch with the further beyond, the spirit world, the connection, the shadow work. Very similar to like tarot reading. I always get tarot and tarot. It's tarot. Very similar to like tarot reading and like working on shadow work and things like that. But also scam artist. That's the second career branch, which I think that specifically speaks to how people view occults and like paganism and like mysticism in real life and in The Sims. So you could be both. Well, you can't be both. You got to pick that career branch. You know what I mean. There's also the alchemist career, which is a self-employed career. That's where you make spells and you sell them. You can either do it straight from home or you could make a business. You can build a whole thing. There's also new lot assignments. Vampire Lounge attracts vampires, but various other Sims as well. So like supernatural fans that want to fuck around and find out, and also just other Sims in general. Other like non-occult Sims will come to the bar even if it has a Vampire Lounge lot trait, but you know what I mean. It's mainly to attract the vampires and like have your community of vampires there. There's also Elixir Consignment Store. Offers ingredients to make elixirs, has various skill objects that benefit occults. So the Alchemist Station, which we're going to talk about again in a minute, the Alchemy Station, it just has other it has like the gem cutter, because sometimes you needed specific gems to do your potions, your elixirs. So it was all available in the Elixir consignment shops. Supernatural Hangout is another one. Attracts supernatural creatures / occults. That's literally how it's written. Supernatural creatures with the quotes. Because again, occults were not just what's viewed as supernatural or magic, I should say. There are also plant sims and genies and I have a whole list of the types of occults. Fairies, vampires, werewolf, witch, zombie, alien, ghost, genie, imaginary friend, servo, plant sim. Plumbob, I think, is another word for the servo. So some of them seem to be more science-based, but some of them are like specifically supernatural, magic, that kind of vibe. Then there's one new rabbit hole that was included with the Sims 3 Supernatural. It's the Arboretum, and fairies can participate in gardening contests, look for fairies, and play fairy games. So that one's kind of specific to fairies, but that's okay. I've mentioned the alchemy skill by now, once or twice. So let's get into what the alchemy skill is, because this was a skill that was specifically added to the Sims franchise. Each individual occult that got added with the Supernatural, and also vampires who were added in Late Night, but were expanded on in Supernatural, all of them have their hidden like skill bar. And essentially it's like for a vampire, you go from a fledgling to a master vampire. Similar in The Sims 4, it has that kind of similarity to it. Witches go from level 0 to level 10. It's a skill in itself, but it's very specific to whichever occult you're playing with. Alchemy is a new skill that was added in The Sims 3 Supernatural that anybody could do. It was not occult specific. It was not locked behind an occult. Anybody could use the cauldron, could make elixirs, and do it. So the new skill in alchemy, I think it's Alistair's, but it's spelled really weird. Alistair's Alchemy Station, which is where you use it. Alchemy can be learned through the station, researching, or alchemy skill books. Once Supernatural is installed, alchemy skill books are available at bookstores and elixir consignment shops. Alchemy classes can be taken at the Vault of Antiquity. There we go. Vault of Antiquity, which is specifically in the world that got added with The Sims 3 Supernatural, which we're going to talk about next. But alchemy, I find, is a very important thing to talk about before we discuss the other games. So I want to talk about it and get it out of the way first. Potions that you can make and use on the alchemy station have potions, elixirs, they're the same. Well, no, because potions are more of the science station thing that you can use. Elixirs specifically are through the alchemy skill. Many elixirs can be drank by or thrown on child sims or older, but some have higher age requirements. So some child sims can be affected by this. But children, I want to make this a very specific point as well, because I think we're going to get serious for a hot second. Footnote. Video games are usually fictional, fantastical. Even if they're like Assassin's Creed, where it's supposed to be like historical fiction, they're always usually pretty fantastical and whatever. A lot of times, video games are commentaries on things that are happening in the real world or have happened in the past. A lot of horror games touch on the fantastical way that traumas and horrible things manifest. Something I am finding and have found throughout this research, because by the time you get to this video, you'll have seen everything that I've researched. Some of the things I've noticed in this franchise, in The Sims specifically, and about supernaturals and how magic and being supernatural has been criminalized, is young Sims are affected, but not nearly as much as I think in the Sim world people might think. Very much like other things in our world, where it's very much like think of the children, but it's not that deep if you know what you're talking about. So I say that some potions can be thrown on or drank by children, but they're very few and far between. A lot of Sims cannot interact with children Sims as the Occults, or in a like occult ways, with Sims younger than teenagers. Even then, teenagers are extremely limited with what occult abilities and actions they can do. It's mainly young adult to elder, where a lot of the interactions, a lot of the abilities are present. And again, I am seeing through my research that I think perhaps the criminalization may have been influenced by how the children and child Sims are affected by this, when in reality, they're not as affected as maybe it was thought that they were. See what I'm saying? So, back to being funny and silly. Elixirs have elixirs have various benefits, but also negatives. So I wanted to touch on some that are like actually benefits. So we have the Invigorating Elixir and the Vial of Bliss. Both is giving you energy restoring and like fun and social restoring. So they're beneficial elixirs that you can have. And they're also, how do I say this the right way? Harmless, but in like a good way. Fairly harmless in the sense of like they help you with your energy and they help you with like your fun and joy, but not specifically because they're magic, I think. I feel like the Invigorating Elixir, because it says energy is restored by 25%, but you could also do that from like napping on a couch in The Sims. It has the same benefit. If it's a nice couch, it has the exact same percentage of benefit. Same thing with the Vial of Bliss. Fun and social are restored by 25%. Specific interactions that you can do or specific activities you can do in The Sims are the same amount of benefit. One is an elixir versus one is like playing a video game. It just depends on which road you're taking. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not more beneficial or more harmful. And in that same vein, these are harmless in like, again, a pretty standard way. The Flask of Angry Bees and the Melancholy Serum. Flask of Angry Bees causes a bee attack. So does using a beehive. It's not like, I don't think that's like a crazy out there elixir that you can have. It could be seen as like bad and like used as an attack because it's a magic potion, but like it's all like you could also just use a beehive and it would be the same kind of effect. You know what I mean? The Melancholy Serum, fun is reduced by 40% and stops rising for 6 hours. A lot of things do that to your Sims. Spraining their ankle, being fatigued, eating the wrong food, interacting with a Sim they don't like, interacting with an evil Sim they don't like. It's not specific to the elixir, but these are elixirs that exist. Then there are ones that are a little more, maybe a little more occult. Essence of Magic, which fully restores a fairy's or witch's magic, because the more you use your magic, the more your magic drains. It makes you tired. The Essence of Magic refills that for you. It's like a fucking energy drink for magic. Zombification, and it turns a Sim into a zombie for 6 hours. That one's a little scary when you think about the fact that elixirs can be thrown at people. But again, alchemy and elixir making is not specific to occult Sims. I'm not a witch in The Sims 3. I could make a zombification elixir. And vampiric sunscreen allows vampires to stay in the sun without negative effects for 12 hours. And if we're looking at it from a supernatural skeptic point of view, and we're like, God, thank God vampires only come out at night because, yikes, don't want to fuck with them. Vampiric sunscreen being available is a little spooky. I'll give you that. Then they get a little scarier. Bottled mummy curse, which is turning a sim into a mummy. And this is not... I know the Sims 3 World Adventures is... Or what? I don't know if it still is, but the Sims 3 Supernatural. The Sims 3 World Adventures was fairly, not catastrophic, controversial. Fairly controversial when it first came out because a main point of the Sims 3 Supernatural is being able to be Indiana Jones, essentially, and, like, temple loot. What's the word I'm looking for? There's a specific word I'm looking for. But you can essentially, like, loot temples and, like, explore temples. So it was fairly controversial because, like, the Sims franchise is very American. It was made by an American. So there is cultural insensitivity there because you're going through, like, tombs that are essentially resting places and disturbing them and looting them. And there are usually mummies, which are very fantasticized, and that's not the right word either. Very... made very, like, mythical and magical when in ancient Egypt, like, mummification was just a way of life. It was just a part of their tradition. Very, like, Egypt mania kind of vibes. So the mummies in the Sims franchise are made to be, like, very scary and, like, very monstrous. So bottled mummy curse is kind of spooky when you look at it in the Sims. There's the potent cure elixir. It cancels the effects of totification, zombification, transformation into a tragic clown, but also cures any occult life state. I say that's part of the scary ones because it can, when you understand the fact that any sim can make a potent cure elixir, that could be used to terrorize occult sims. People that, like, don't want to be non-occult. People that don't want to be human. Like, somebody who's grown up as a vampire their entire fucking life, like, born and raised. Being able to wield a potent cure elixir just because you're a supernatural skeptic, I don't like that, personally. And I'm looking at it in the lens of being criminalized and being attacked. There's also the potent personality adjuster, which I think is scary because it randomly changes all of your Sims traits. It turns them into a completely different person. There is clone drone, which clones a sim. Cloning, especially in The Sims 3, is very prevalent. They kind of use quite a few methods through multiple expansion packs to make cloning very, like, it's here and it's a possibility, you should do it. I don't love that. I don't believe in that. I think that's scary. So it's on the scary list. There's also Age of Instant, which instantly ages a sim. Imagine a sim is an adult and you want to fuck with them because you're mad at them for whatever reason. You can throw it and suddenly turn them into elder. And elders do not have a long lifespan in the Sim series. Once they turn into an elder, they got like a week left at best. It's scary. Midas Touch? Anyway, Midas Touch allows the sim to turn objects and other sims into gold. Lasts for 6 hours. I think that's too long to wield that kind of power. No thank you. And the origin of the tragic clown gives the sim the tragic clown's clothing and negative moodlet. Sims near the clown also get a negative moodlet. Lasts 24 hours. Yikes, bro. I don't know how I feel about the tragic clown. I don't play enough with or near the tragic clown to have a super good opinion on him, but definitely, like I said at the beginning of the video, watch Plumbella's and Izzy's videos because they both talk about the tragic clown in a bit more detail. But I don't know how I feel about the tragic clown. I'm like 50-50, like kind of scared, but also like I could fix him. Now, I've talked about all of that. And I have mentioned that there is a world specific to The Sims 3 Supernatural that gets added, where everybody in town is a cult, necessarily. There's very few non-occult Sims. Let's talk about it. We're going to talk about the world Moonlit Falls. With its misty waterfalls, deep forest, and fog-shrouded coves, Moonlight Falls casts a spell on all who enter. The town was founded centuries ago by two immigrant families, the Van Golds, extraordinarily long-lived and sun-averse, and the Wolves, high-spirited and strangely affected by the full moon. They were soon joined by the odd, seemingly magical, forest-dwelling folk. The town is known for its peculiar potions, made from plants, gems, and minerals, unique to the quiet corner of the world. Some ingredients can only be found at night, but only the truly adventurous stay out after dark. Some say it's a whole different world under the moonlight. I love Moonlight Falls. It's one of my favorite places to play, and I love the atmospheric lighting that it does in Moonlight Falls. A note on the Sims 3 wiki, which I found incredibly helpful and incredibly cool. Now it's 100% canon in my head. I don't care if it's not proven. It's 100% canon in my head. I'm going to read you this little footnote that I've starred. We're going to get real up close and personal. It has a very similar layout to the Sims Making Magic neighborhood, Magic Town, including a rocky river in the same space that cuts through the town, a waterfall and a bridge in the same place, a mountain range and the same type of trees throughout the town. To me, that's 1000% canonical now. It's the same world, especially because we're looking at a timeline. I don't know why I'm like going at you like a dog. To me, that's canonical, especially because we're going to be talking about The Sims 1 next. I also have a note of families of note in Moonlight Falls. Crumplebottom and their witches. And one part of the Goth family, because the Goth family, very similar to the Addams family, is pretty much overarching. And there's cousin its all over the place. The Goth family in Moonlight Falls are ghosts. I'm not saying they're interconnected, but they actually are. Mortimer Goth's mother, her sister is Agnes Crumplebottom. That's a canonical fact. So now I want to touch on several of the occults or the occult life states that exist within The Sims 3, because I think looking at these specific occults and looking at the aspects of them, the powers that they have, the abilities that they have, is going to help, because these are ones that are continuous throughout the 3 games and throughout the timeline. As you'll see it as we go throughout this video, they do decline in abilities and visibility. So I wanted to touch on quite a few of them. We're going to start with zombies. In The Sims 3, it is a temporary condition and not a full life state. I do have the notes, but I'm trying so hard to just not directly read off of them. It's just hard for me, okay? But it is a temporary condition and not a full life state in The Sims 3, which is not true for other Sims games. Spoiler alert. But there are multiple ways to become a zombie. You have to, by drinking one of the zombification elixirs, which is a drinking or have it thrown at you. So it can either be by choice if you just want to experiment, or it can be fucking thrown at you. You're just trying to pass by and somebody's attacking you. You can get bitten by a zombie. You can eat the quick meal brain freeze a la mode for a 0.6% chance to become a zombie after an hour, which is kind of crazy. Knowing that you can't even, like, eat food without being poisoned, which, like, it's a little too real. It's a little too topical for what we're going through, at least in America. A witch can cast a reanimation ritual on a tombstone, which we're going to talk a little more about that when we get to witches. After dream about the supernatural in a dream pod, and Sims can end up with a bad dream from it, and I guess that's how you can turn into a zombie. Again, the dream pod is something very scientific and not occult, which science and magic mixing quite a lot. A black dragon can give a Sim a dragon curse. That's if you have the Sims 3 Dragon Valley. Is that what it's called? Which I'm not touching on that. That's not, I wasn't going to go through like 18 expansion packs and worlds for each part of this video. If you want to do more research on your own, you can. And again, open-ended conversation. If you think there's a point or object or ability in the Sims 3 Dragon Valley, and you're like, that should have been in this video because it absolutely proves your theory right, then egg on my face, please tell me about it. You can also be giving the voodoo curse spell by a Sim holding a voodoo doll. And voodoo dolls are another thing that non-occult Sims also have access to. So why are we criminalizing occults? I ask. Because again, it seems like a lot of non-occult sims have access to things that occult sims have, and I feel like they're used more by non-occults than by actual occults. So why are the occults being criminalized and not like voodoo dolls? You win in The Sims 4, you win a voodoo doll if you play enough jokes at a festival. That's fucked up. Especially if at some point voodoo dolls could inflict a zombification curse. Temporary or not, that's fucked up. Babies, toddlers, children, and pets cannot become zombies under any circumstances. That is a specific note on the Sims Wiki. Random inactive Sims will become zombies every full moon of the lunar cycle. Zombies will remain as such for 48 Sim hours. So for 2 days, they are zombies, but they stop being zombies after 2 days. It's like, yes, but no. Supernaturals, or occults, Sims are unable to become zombies through being bitten, only through elixirs and reanimation ritual. So, perhaps it's the scare. If we're looking at zombies specifically, perhaps it's the scare of occults have an immunity to it, unless through, like, supernatural intervention. But non-occult Sims can just be zombies, just they can be. Like, that's scary, I'll give you that. However, zombies can be cured. In more ways, if not, like, the exact same amount of ways that they can become zombies. The Cure and Potent Cure Elixir, which are both elixirs that you can make in the alchemy skill. Witches can use the Sunlight Charm, having a jar of fairy dust used on them, so other occults can assist you in not becoming a zombie anymore. Being defeated by a pea shooter. Being given the Bless spell by a Sim holding a voodoo doll. So again, the voodoo doll can taketh away, but also giveth. Somebody needs to regulate that shit. The Door of Life and Death, the monster that lurks below the doormat, may pull them under and fling them back out as a cured Sim. So the Door of Life and Death you cannot use to, like, fix your zombism? Zombification. One of those. But the monster under the front mat can fix you. So that's a lot to look at for zombies, I think. It's the fact that you can turn into a zombie in, like, a lot of ways, but you can also be cured in a lot of ways. And the fact that the voodoo doll, which is not regulated and is not specific to a supernatural, can, one, turn you into a zombie, but also cure you. And the fact that witches and fairies can help you not be a zombie. It's a lot of helping and hurting, but it feels like there's more hurting in the non-occult column and more helping in the occults column. Let's get into fairies. They were specifically introduced in The Sims 3 Supernatural, and they are only in The Sims 3 Supernatural, which kind of fucked up. I like the fairies. It's kind of fucked up that they're only in this game. They're known to be mischievous and play tricks on Sims, tend to take a liking to animals and gardening. So pretty much what, if you're interested in any kind of supernatural occult in real life, it's very, like, this is my mermaid and fairy book shelf. Fairies are pretty standard across the board. Seen as tricksters, seen as, like, nature beings. Okay? To become a fairy, you can make them in Creative Sim, just like most of these occults that I'm talking on. Not zombies. Not zombies. Okay? But you can become a fairy through Creative Sim. You can also get a fairy opportunity if you're in the Arboretum. If you are a Sim that is non-occult and you're in the Arboretum, you can get a fairy opportunity. And it's through one of those, like, chance card kind of things. You have to answer the right way, and then you can get a fairy opportunity. So that's super cute. It's you willingly being like, I would like to become a fairy. So that's cool. You can also get the Bottled Blessing of the Fae elixir, which, again, I said it, they're kind of scary because they can be thrown at you. But also, the Bottled Blessing of the Fae is one of the elixirs that are a higher alchemy skill to be able to make. They're harder ingredients to find and costs more to sell. So it's not something that's, like, taken lightly, the Bottled Blessing of the Fae. Even though you can still throw it at somebody and, like, inflict that upon them, it's not something that's taken very lightly. Interesting things about fairies. They have a lifespan 5 times longer than a normal Sim. They have benefits in gardening and can build their charisma skill at a faster rate. So very much like Fae traps. That's what I got from that. Very, like Fae traps. and they can learn a variety of powers and tricks. They use auras, which can affect themselves and nearby Sims. When you play in The Sims 3, if you use an aura, it like glows around you different colors. And it can, in fact, affect other Sims around you, whether for good or for bad. I always used it to help my younger Sims age up, or not age up faster, skill up faster. I always used it for like, if the mom was a fairy, I always had her do like specific auras so that the kids could learn their skills a little faster, which I think is cute. They don't have auras that can negatively affect Sims. They have like tricks that they can negatively affect Sims with, but their auras are always beneficial to themselves and to others. Fairies are not the bad guys here. Why have they gone extinct by the time of The Sims 2? They have. Spoilers for The Sims 2, but they've essentially gone extinct. Fairies can be cured with the potent cure elixir, which that's across the board as well. The potent cure elixir is going to cure pretty much everybody. They can also be asked by their romantic partner to forsake the Fae, which I think is a crazy dialogue option to ever choose. Especially to your romantic partner? That's crazy. Why'd you fall in love with them as a fairy if you just want them to forsake the Fae? So werewolves, they are a very powerful and social supernatural. I wrote that down specifically because that is made a note in the Sims Supernatural wiki to say that they're very powerful and very social. That is a note to be made, and I think that's important to looking at werewolves as a whole. You can obviously make them and create a sim, but you can get werewolf powers by receiving a cursed bite from another werewolf. Keep that specific thing in mind for werewolves as we go through to the other two games. They receive a cursed bite from another werewolf. That's important. You can also get the bottled curse of the lichen. Called a curse, but again, just like the blessing of the Fae elixir, higher skill level, harder ingredients, more expensive. So it's called the curse of the lichen, but like it does not fuck around with the actual making of it. The werewolf lifespan is 1.5 times longer than normal Sims. They gain athletic skills faster and they will always win fights. It says will always win fights. I did not see any confirm or deny about between werewolves and vampires, but it just says always will win fights. So I don't know if they will always beat vampire ass, but it's a possibility that they could. I feel like my eyes are crazy. A special version of tag between a werewolf and fairy is mentioned in details in the game files, but has not yet been thoroughly researched. I love that. I love that there's like a bit of mystery to interaction between occults. Because I think as the player, we're kind of non-occult and we're seeing what's happening. So I like that there are some secrets there still where it says it's in game file, but we don't actually have too much information about it. But yeah, apparently there's a special game of tag between fairies and werewolves that they can play. A werewolf can recruit other werewolves to form a pack, they have a community. They have like their form of community. Yeah. I don't know. I was looking for a word and I wasn't sure what it was. And the curing is the same way that you can cure pretty much anybody else. Except there's no option to like forsake werewolfism. It's just like the potent cure elixir. I think the sunshine spell can do it too, but we're gonna get to witches. You hold on there. Now we're gonna get into vampires, and vampires have a bit more bulk to them because they were added in The Sims 3 Nightlife, but then they were revamped and redone in the Sims 4 Supernatural, and also they are the only, I'm trying to think of the Sims 1. I'm not super sure on the Sims 1 off the top of my head, but we're gonna see it in the next part of this video, so you'll be fine. But vampires are the only occult that is present in every Sims game. Vampires have some more weight to them, which is weird because again, when we're talking about the theory of like them being occults being criminalized and magic being criminalized, vampires do not seem affected by that. So maybe they've just mastered the art of laying low and being like, we don't need to fuck around and find out, we're fine. Historically, I think it works for them. So I am very much going to be looking at my notes for the point of the vampire Sims because there's a couple things that were noted in the Sims wiki. When you look up vampires, before you even get into vampires in The Sims 2, and The Sims 3, and The Sims 4, there are multiple things that are noted before you get into the specific game titles. Sims in transition from normal to vampire cannot become pregnant or travel overseas. Genies cannot be turned into vampires or drank from as they lack plasma. We're not going to be talking about genies at all or too much. Don't remember in this video, but it's interesting that you're getting that tidbit about genies when it feels like that's kind of information that like got sprinkled in by accident. You know what I mean? When you stumble upon something you maybe shouldn't have had the access to. Non-vampire Sims can subconsciously detect vampires in their activities, which I also think is very interesting. Non-occult Sims have kind of like the sense that like a vampire is nearby. All non-vampire Sims without the brave, daredevil, or evil trait near a vampire they don't know will receive a hunted moodlet. They'll be uncomfortable and they'll feel like they're being hunted. Okay. If a Sim is a vampire and a celebrity and bites someone in public, paparazzi will start a scandal about the bite. Vampire celebrities will be publicly disgraced. Let's look, publicly disgraced if they woohoo with a mortal, either in public or on a home lot. So if you are a vampire fucking with a mortal, an occult with a non-occult, and you woohoo, you get publicly disgraced. That's fucked up. Maybe the vampires were already like kind of being criminalized, so the reason why they're so like under the radar and seemingly very unaffected in later games is because they were like, that's it for me, bro. I'm gonna pack up and lay low for the rest of forever. Thank you. Because that's crazy. Even if you're at home, in the privacy of your own home with your mortal partner, your non-occult partner, your human partner, you're getting publicly disgraced for doing the nasty, the horizontal tango? Horrible. Mortal Sims who woohoo with vampires will become publicly disgraced from woohooing with an occult. So there is, again, some prejudice there. More so than I thought, actually. I know I made these notes, but I said in the beginning that they're kind of indifferent, but apparently vampires specifically we're not fucking with them. Not if we don't want to be publicly disgraced. Same thing with the other occults. To become a vampire, you can create one and create a sim. You have to be bitten by a pre-existing vampire. Vampire ghost can turn living Sims into vampires, but a ghost cannot be turned into a vampire. So ghosts had a bit more ability, which, when this video comes out, that's actually kind of cool to think about, that ghosts have some abilities, but can't be affected by the same abilities because of the new pack that's going to be coming out. I'm so incredibly hopeful for the new Sims 4 pack, and I want to be excited about it, but I am keeping my expectations very, very, very low because I don't want to be disappointed. And I know I will be. Anyway, the Science Lab, which is a pretty standard lot that you get in every world in The Sims 3, Science Lab can provide an anti-vampirism potion for 3,000 simoleons and, again, the potent cure elixir. That's great. But the fact that science is, again, interlinked with the occult, with the supernatural. Very interesting. Vampire children and toddlers can learn skills quickly, but that's basically the most they can do as a child or toddler. Same thing with fairies and werewolves. I didn't make too many notes about like occults as younger children because, again, I think it's viewed very much as like it affects them more than it actually does. It literally is just like showing that they can build certain skills faster. It's specific to their occult. Like I believe fairy Sims gain like music talent faster as toddlers and kids, you know? Just things like that. It is possible for a vampire and a ghost to have children. Just thought that was cool. Thought that was an interesting little tidbit to have. Vampires also have a lifespan 5 times longer than a normal sim. There's also some benefits, some positives to being vampires, which I wanted to make note of these because maybe this leads to some of the prejudice that they're facing in The Sims 3, where it's publicly disgraced to bump uglies with your mortal partner in the privacy of your own coffin. But they get enhanced motives, ability to hunt, can make Sims think of you, can read minds, super speed and endurance, can learn skills faster, but only at night, can see in the dark. They have hypnotic abilities, intimidation, and can become immortal. They're not immortal, weirdly enough, in The Sims 3. That is like a point that was made on their page. They're not actively immortal, but you can make them immortal if you work hard enough at it and you put in your lifetime rewards towards being immortal, but they're not inherently immortal. They just live longer. Weaknesses include thirst, sunlight, garlic, as usual. But also, a thing that I wanted to point out, because this is also a note that was put on the thing. Back to mummies, you know, remember how we talked about the bottled curse of the mummy? If a vampire sleeps in the cursed sarcophagus of kings 3 times, it will replace one of their traits with the evil trait. I don't know why that was like an important thing to note, but it isn't a thing to note. Apparently it's important enough. So now we're going to get into the 2, which, like I said at the beginning of this video, my personal theory and what I'm seeing through my research that I think my theory is proven correct. Aliens and witches are the next 2 occults that I want to talk about. And again, witches are the occult supernatural kind of category. Aliens are the occult other, more science-based than magic-based. I want to say fiction, supernatural, magic. It seems that we're doing a lot of magic and science intermingling. And that's a thing that just is in the Sims franchise in general. That's been a thing that's prevalent in all of the games. And I think it's going to show the most in this part of the video, because when we get to The Sims 2 and we talk about what kind of states all of these supernaturals and occults are like stuck in, essentially, I think I'm right in saying that aliens and witches are the ones that caused the criminalization. Obviously not all of them, but I think they were the ones that were the main concerns, I guess I should say. Maybe they didn't fucking do anything, because I still don't know. Maybe we'll know by the end of the video together. It really is like fuck around and find out with this. But we still don't know if they are the main reasons. I think they might be. The main problems that non-occults had with occults, essentially. So, let's get into aliens. Aliens cannot be created in Create a Sim. And aliens were not added with The Sims 3 Supernatural. They were added with seasons, which I think is also kind of... I don't think the Sims team and the Sims creators actually put that much thought into it, but I'm putting that much thought into it, and I think that is telling, that they were added with seasons but not supernatural. They cannot be created in a Create a Sim. Abilities and differently named needs aside, aliens remain extremely similar to normal Sims. All aliens, whether they've had any contact with other aliens, have access to a hidden alien outfit. If you're only a Sims 4 player, that shouldn't be, like, super news to you. But I thought it was cool, again, that, like, they made specific notes on it on the Sims wiki. We didn't have to say those things, but we did. Technically, aliens aren't occults like other creatures. They are a new type of Sim with their own unique DNA. So that's something to be said, too. Occult Sims and non-occult Sims, like magic and human Sims, are the same. Whether they have different aspects of them that make them occult, they're still human Sims. They're just maybe a different type of human. They're a human adjacent. Aliens are completely separate. Occult Sims, non-occult Sims, they're like here, and they're like intermingling, right? Aliens are fucking over here doing their own thing. So aliens are, in fact, alien in the Sims franchise. They are not similar. It says they're remarkably similar, but they are not the same. And that is a specific distinction that they're making here. Aliens are unable to get plastic surgery due to cultural differences. I thought that was an interesting thing too. I don't know why, and I feel like maybe that has more to that, but I could just be overthinking. But I think that's a very specific thing to mention. I have a couple other, like, little notes that were on their wiki page that it, like, doesn't... I feel like, you know what I mean? I don't know, like, why did they put these notes on there if it's not extremely telling to something more in the gameplay? That's what I'm thinking. Aliens can work part-time jobs in a science lab as a test subject. They can work other jobs, but aliens kind of sit at the test subject at the science career. The job description for the military career giving to aliens, the military is prepared to spend generously to acquire intelligence from any alien that is willing to betray its own kind. So if your alien sim joins the military career in The Sims 3, they're willing to give you money, and you are going to get specific career effects if you're an alien sim. While a sim is asleep, there is a chance that aliens will visit their lot and collect data from the area. That was such a thing in The Sims 3, and I was obsessed with it. They don't necessarily abduct, but they will show up. Aliens will be more likely to come to a sim's lot if they use a telescope often and collect space rocks. Which, if you ever played The Sims 3 and your children fucking died because they weren't allowed to leave school when there was a fucking meteor shower, you know that space rocks are around. You just gotta find them. But also, speaking of space rocks, aliens do not have the energy, need that other Sims have, even, other occults. They don't have the energy need, they have brain power. Which, again, confirms that they're not Sims. They're their own thing off to the side. But having space rocks in your inventory, funnily enough, will keep your brain power up. Interesting, huh? Now, aliens have a variety of abilities, and I think theirs are a little more interesting than the vampire abilities, so I kind of wrote them a little more, concise. Because, again, aliens are not occult or human. They're their own separate thing. So, alien abilities include mental scan, transmuting precious metals and gems, mind control, recombobulation, don't know what that is, I'll probably put something on the screen to explain what that is. Brain power lasts longer and replenishes faster than energy. Sleeping offers no benefits to aliens because they don't have an energy need. And they can establish telepathic links to nearby Sims. So even if you're not friendly, you can establish telepathic links to nearby Sims. They also have UFOs, just like they do in every single Sims game that they are featured in. They have UFOs. However, the difference with The Sims 3 is that if you have an alien sim that joins your household, they come with a UFO. So it's like a standard issue for every alien that exists. They have UFOs. They're actually called Galaxa space cars. An alien's preferred vehicle, it'll always be their preferred vehicle unless you change it, can abduct a sim or their friends as a joke, in parentheses. So that's an option that you have. They can invade community lots, which is they shoot laser beams and shit. And Sims will get the singed moodlet. Create violent storms. That's just a possibility. And that's different from invading community lots. That is separate. They can also travel just around the world. They can take their UFO to run down to the grocery store really quick and bring back groceries. I had my Sims do that all of the time. But they can also go to space rabbit holes. Like the rocket in The Sims 4, they can just go to space rabbit holes and take a little trip home real quick, or to Homeworld, or wherever the fuck it is. I don't think it's 6am. I think 6am is very specific to The Sims 4. Anyway, now let's talk about abductions. Now, abductions work two ways. First of which being the pretty standard abductions that happen in every Sims game that aliens are available, which is just randomized and doesn't matter what gender expression you are. Everybody can get abducted. However, male Sims, male presenting Sims, however, male anatomy Sims, however we want to phrase that, because the Sims games are not very expansive with gender identity. Sims 4 sure has that, but it's still not great, in my opinion. I feel like it could be better for how far we are in the world and video games. However, male Sims will almost always be impregnated by abductions. And the child of an abduction will always be a pure blood alien. They will not be 50-50 human alien. They will always be pure blood alien. And when you have an alien sim in your household, you can do abductions for fun. And you can be very selective about who you abduct. Just like it said, you can do abductions as a joke to your friends and family, I guess. Abductions do not require a telescope in The Sims 3 specifically. So, again, aliens are their own separate thing here. And now that I've talked about aliens, I kind of am regretting not doing a little more research into the science labs in The Sims 3 and the science career. because I keep mentioning that like magic and science are very like especially in The Sims 3 so far. Sorry, my cat is coming to say hello. Hi, baby. Magic and science are very heavily interconnected throughout The Sims 3. And what impression I'm getting as I'm going through this research and talking about it here in the video with you guys is that declines as the prejudice and the criminalization of occults rises. And I think that's kind of relevant to the real world as well. Knowledge is power, and knowledge is important, and that's just it. It teaches us things. When we don't understand things, we fear things. So the lack of like scientific integration, intervention, knowledge with occults and with occult abilities is very prevalent to this situation, this reality within Sim Nation. Now we are going to talk about witches, which is my favorite occult to play with in The Sims 3. I always was a witch in The Sims 3. I made the whole freaking 2-part videos about this years ago, where I married Bella Bachelor. And we had a son, and his name was Salem, but he looked like Atreus from God of War. But yeah, I love witches in The Sims 3. And specifically on the wiki, it says, witches are one of the largest and most complicated life stages in the games. Most features of the life state are focused on magic and the ways witches can use it to manipulate their surroundings. Witches have gotten in some games, not as much as vampires, but witches are one of the occults that are always like the most powerful, the most accessible, the most flushed out in Sims games across the boards. I would argue that aliens and vampires are all like those three, aliens, vampires, witches, are the top occults, the way that the games frame them. Werewolves are absolutely strong contenders with The Sims 4, but again, we're not talking about The Sims 4. It's its whole separate thing. It's on an alternate timeline. Like, No. Witches can cast spells, charms, and curses to better their own lives and the lives of other Sims, or cause ruin and mischief. The wording they use on the Sims Wiki, again, I think is very, very telling. And I don't think EA does the Sims Wiki. I'm like almost positive EA does not do the Sims Wiki. I'm pretty sure the Sims Wiki is like fans. So fans know better than EA. Young witches, okay, this is back to the children aspect where people think they're more affected than they actually are. Young witches can't use their powers until they're teenagers. However, the ability to make toys disappears will let the player know whether or not a sim is or isn't one. So it's literally absolutely fucking harmless, the abilities that the children and toddlers have. You won't even know your sim is possibly an occult until they make their toy disappear. A witch's romantic interest can ask the witch to forsake witchitude, which will trigger a special opportunity. Sims can complete the opportunity by visit the Vault of Antiquity or the Science Lab to be cured. Science and magic, we're back at it again. Again, the fact that you can ask your partner to forsake their occultness is kind of wild to me. I would never. Be a monster fucker, grow up. Witches, ages from teenager to older, automatically receive a classic witch wand and the ability to learn the spellcaster hidden skill. So again, it doesn't start until they're teenagers with the like heavy, like these are your abilities, these are the things you can do. Children and toddlers are not affected really at all. And all witches start with the ability to play with magic and conjure apples. That is kind of the only thing teenagers can do in The Sims 3 is play with magic and conjure apples. That's it. They really can't cast. It doesn't matter. Like if they play with magic all of the time and raise their like spellcaster ability, they cannot actually cast any spells until they hit young adult. Like it seems to be, if we're looking at it not in like the gameplay and game mechanics way of it, if we're thinking of the story of it, it seems to be that all occults understand that like youth and power are volatile. A person going through puberty should definitely not be trusted with like a transformation or like the power to turn Sims into ones like you, or cast spells. I feel like within the world of occults, it's a very understood fact that young children need to be, like, parented, like, monitored, so that there's not, like, dire consequences. And I don't think the non-occults understand that. All spellcasting abilities require wielding a magic wand. The limitation can be overcome with the Magic Hands lifetime reward. And that is a lifetime reward that's like 40 or 50,000 points. You gotta do a lot of work. And honestly, you can't reach that amount by like the end of being a teenager. Even if you go from like newborn to teenager, you cannot reach the 50,000 lifetime rewards unless you're like using cheats. So again, that's like a high level kind of ability, is to not have to use your wand. And that's a limitation that's put in The Sims 3, is you can only use your wand. The fact that you can use your hands if you work hard enough to get this like lifetime reward, which I think it speaks to like how like your experience and like the levels of your power. The vampires can become immortal, and it's about the same cost. It is the same cost. It just doesn't show you all the other occult ones if you're not a witch, but you're a vampire. And same thing with werewolves. You can become the alpha wolf. Fairies have like Queen of the Fae or something like that. But again, it's lifetime rewards that like, once you have them, are very impactful and very powerful. But it's things that you've had to work for and put your time and discipline into your magical abilities. And non-occult Sims don't get those things. Mermaid kelp, I'm pretty sure, is like a fairly cheap, maybe like 20,000, which I think compared to 50 obviously is not a lot. You would want $50 more than you would want $20. Things like mermaid kelp, which is like, that's the way you can become a mermaid in The Sims 3. Like, I feel like it's very like, certain things that non-occult Sims have access to without fully being occults, I feel like are very taken for granted, as opposed to being an occult Sim and working your ass off throughout your entire life to be able to become like just being able to use your hands to cast spells, or to fully become immortal, or fully become an alpha wolf. Witches, okay, and to go with the magic hands, witches can also turn eligible large wardrobes into magic portals? That's nuts. The fact that you could just have one like in your house. That takes a lot of work. That's a high level. Witches can learn alchemy skill faster. So alchemy skill is not limited to witches, but they can learn it faster. Faster than normal Sims. If a witch owns a cat or minor pet, it will give them the animal familiar moodlet, which will increase the skill rate towards spellcasting, hidden skills, and lowers their magical depletion. So it does have benefits to have your familiar with you. I feel like that's normal for all witches and all media, you know? Witches are good in defending themselves from tricks pulled by other occults, and I think that is one of the things that makes them one of the most powerful of all the occults. I think it's more of like the interaction of like, well, you get the plus sign or the minus sign for other occults, but the fact that it specifically says witches are good at defending themselves from other occults and their tricks, that tells you right there there's a lot going on with witches. There's some discipline going on with witches that maybe we're not privy to. Witches cannot clone themselves because of the power? Maybe. I think that one's kind of cool to think about. I think witches maybe shouldn't be cloned. Witches have access to a variety of abilities, just like every other occult, but theirs differ from charms, spells, and curses. And similar to the elixirs, they have varying moral alignments. That's what we use. So they have things like good luck, love charms, needs charms. They can cast them on themselves or other Sims. For, you know, it is what it says on the tin. Good luck for good luck, love for love, like help you find love, needs for your needs. They can also cast the sunlight charm, which to me is nuts. Like power-wise, I think this is nuts. Cures zombies and other negative moodlets, including allergies. Affects other occults. And I'm going to put it up on the screen. Moodlets the spell are capable of curing include all, but are not limited to. And these are all of the things the sunlight charm can cure. The sunlight charm is a higher level charm that you can touch on. I think that's kind of nuts. If you're a witch, you can kind of like, you can do a lot. For better or worse. The thing is, it's called a charm, but there might be occult Sims where you can cure their vampirism. and they don't want that. So that's kind of scary for occults and non-occults, which again, like I said, I think witches are maybe one of the reasons why. Curses include toadification, turns a target into a toad sims. Occults are immune from toadification curses. So this is mainly one to, like, if you want to do it to terrorize non-occults, you can do it to terrorize non-occults. That's kind of the vibe. Haunting curse causes a ghost to haunt the target or backfires and causes instant death to the caster. Like, what do you mean? It's a spell that powerful that can haunt people, can haunt them. Not limited to occult or non-occult. It can haunt them, or it could fucking kill you. My snap is not immediately. I don't know why my snap isn't working, but it could kill you immediately. And also, pestilence. Sims will have regular coughing fits, -30 mood for 2 days. That's a bummer. The Sims, some of the moodlets in The Sims 3 are fucking crazy, and like they're fairly easy to like balance and handle, but you could be in a negative mood for 2 whole days because this bitch cast pestilence on you. And also people who played The Sims 3 later in life, because it came out later in life, like in real life, coughing fits are scary if you played The Sims 1 and The Sims 2 beforehand. Because that's how Sims died, at random, in older Sims games. They would cough a few times, you'd be like, oh, that's weird, I gotta get the medicine. And then you get the medicine and it would be too late. Like, they're dead. So I think that's pretty scary. They have a variety of spells as well. Like, they were, you know, whatever. A lot of them are like needs or like need stoppers or something like that. But the one I have written down is the reanimation rituals. Cast on a tombstone will bring back the target as a zombie. Does not work on children's graves. So you can take somebody who's laid to rest, whether too soon or exactly on time for whatever happened to that sim, but the fact that you can bring them back as a zombie. And yes, zombification, zombieism in The Sims 3 is a temporary existence, usually ends within 48 hours. Doesn't make it any less horrible, though, in my opinion. I can't stand zombies as monsters. I think they're too scary, personally. But the fact that even as like a brief time, the fact that a witch has that power to create a zombie, I think is already more than enough. And the very specific note that it does not work on children's graves. Again, I think there's a very specific kind of like understanding within the occult world and within the occult society that like children, occult or not, do not need to be overly involved in the power dynamics and the power fluctuation. So that's all the information we have for The Sims 3, and I am already feeling like my theory is being proven correct, and we're going to see it more in The Sims 1, in The Sims 2, because this is the world of The Sims 3. This is the beginning of the timeline within the story, and this is just what the world is. These are just all facts of life within The Sims 3. Now, we are going to be going 15 to 25 years into the future with The Sims, and we're going to see a lot of interesting differences between The Sims 3 and The Sims 1. Again, the note that was made about Moonlit Falls from The Sims 3, saying that is strangely similar to The Sims 1 Magic Town, in my head, it's canonical that they're the same place. So we get to look at the difference that 15 to 25 years makes to Moonlit Falls that makes it Magic Town. Why is it now Magic Town? And why is it the way that it is? In part 2. Who knows? We're gonna find out together! I tried to do like a little plumb bob, and I tried to do it like this green, but it turned out yellow, and that's honestly like how I feel right now. I'm so sleepy, and I just want to lay down. But we're here to talk about The Sims 1 today. We're here to talk about The Sims 1 and the history of magic. I'm introing this section of the video like you didn't already watch God knows how long of footage talking about what we're doing in this video. But we're here to talk about The Sims 1 today. And just a quick refresher, as we said at the beginning, middle, and end of the last section of this video, The Sims 1, canonically in the story, not in when it was published, in the story, takes place about 15 to 25 years after The Sims 3. So magic is significantly less. Occult Sims are significantly less. Aliens aren't even in The Sims 1 at all. They're not at all. And in real life, was that because of the mechanics of The Sims at the time? Yes. But in the sense of the story and occults and prejudice and criminalization around and against magic, that's interesting to think about. I have my notes. I have more notes. This is your sneak peek. Look at all this. All these are notes as well. I'm not angling that right at all. So anyway, let's talk about The Sims 1 and let's talk about Making Magic, because The Sims 1 Making Magic is the only instance in which magic is being referenced, used, displayed. I say that because, again, in real life, is it the mechanics of the game and like the capabilities of the game at the time? Yes, absolutely. But The Sims 3 had aliens in seasons and vampires in late night before Supernatural even came out. So we were given like insight to occults and supernaturals before there was maybe, let's say, a discovery of Moonlight Falls. I like to think that the vampires from late night were like the ones that were like most seen, but I think they originated from Moonlight Falls. What is the town called in nightlife? Bridgeport? I like to think that they were just like public in Bridgeport, but Moonlight Falls is like where they originate. And let me remind you that at the end of last section, well, was it end of last section? When we talked about Moonlight Falls specifically, the way it's described on the Sims Wiki said is strangely similar to the town which is given to you when you have The Sims 1 Making Magic. So in my head, on this channel, in this video right now, canonically, the town in Making Magic is the same town as Moonlight Falls. However, taking the notes out, it is now called Magic Town. It's no longer called Moonlit Falls. It is Magic Town. As we go through this section and as we talk more about Magic Town, I think when we're going off of the idea that Moonlit Falls is Magic Town just 15 to 25 years later, I think it is an intentional, derogatory isn't the right word I'm looking for, but it like is in the same sense. I think it's an intentional derogatory name to be giving Moonlight Falls when you look at the other aspects and like how much magic has sort of devolved from The Sims 3 now into The Sims 1. I think it's an intentional thing to kind of be like looking down on them and kind of like being mean by calling it Magic Town instead of its name Moonlight Falls. So let's get into it. Magic Town, split by a river into two districts, Calamity Forest, where a large carnival has been established, and a residential area known as Creepy Hollow. The descriptions of the lots here in this neighborhood imply that Magic Town is located on the very outskirts of Sim City, and state that the carnival has appeared in the forest overnight. So Moonlit Falls beforehand was an established town. It had a town hall, a police station, a fire station. It had everything. It had a school. It had a military base, just like all towns in The Sims 3 have. But the fact that now it's split into two districts, residential and carnival / shops. Very interesting that it seems like what made it a town, an actual established town, no longer is there. None of that's being upheld. It's now just like carnival and residency. Also, Magic Town has a completely different currency. You can use simoleons still for certain parts of your purchases in Magic Town, but also you use magic coins. Magic coins, but it's all one word, so it's magic coins. That's how I'm pronouncing it. You also need to use magic coins, and that's pretty much the only type of currency you can use to purchase most things in Magic Town. So whether that's deliberate from outsider and non-occult Sims, or it's deliberate from the occult Sims that reside in Magic Town to kind of keep themselves separate for whatever reason, whatever happened, whatever prejudice or maybe violence that they've experienced in the last 15 to 25 years, I think it's interesting. Calamity Forest is unique in that it does not feature any roads whatsoever, while Creepy Hollow is the only location outside of a regular neighborhood or old town in which Sims can live. So there is an option for residency here. There is an option, and that's when you would use simoleons and magic coin, but you cannot purchase a resident lot in Creepy Hollow. I was gonna just say Magic Town. You cannot purchase a resident, like a home, in Creepy Hollow with just simoleons. And while they are being incorporated with Magic Coin being the predominant currency, I wonder why. There's some interesting things, too, about Magic Town. The way you get there, you can use a balloon cab, like a hot air balloon cab, which is really cool. The Sims team in the Sim franchise has referenced the hot air balloon throughout all of the games, which I think is cute, but it was first brought up as the way to get to Magic Town in Making Magic. But there's also, the other way you get there is through a magical hole in the ground. Magical hole in the ground. Very like cartoon-esque, you know, pull it out of your pocket, slap it on the floor, jump in, and when you jump in, it has like a little arrow that points down into it, which is like flashy and like, wow, wow, wow. I love when the Sims games used to be about having fun. But also, one of the new things that Making Magic brings to you before you can even get into Magic Town, whether it's by hot air balloon cab or the hole in the floor, you have to meet the Mystery Man. It's as awful as it sounds, to be quite honest with you. He appears on all magic lots, so when you're in Magic Town, he will be literally everywhere, where he sells and buys wands. And we're going to talk about wands more in a little bit. In addition, Sims can ask him about various aspects of magic. So he's like, the Mystery Man is like the guy in the know. He brings you your like magic box, basically. You know in The Sims 3 where if you had University installed, the mascot would come to your house whether you wanted him to or not and bring you the little freebie bucket. And then if you had Into the Future installed, you'd get a fucking portal, time travel portal on your lot whether you wanted to or not. And how in The Sims 2 you'd get a computer from Mr. Humble whether you wanted to or not. Yeah, this is the Mystery Man. So he brings you a magic box whether you want it or not. You can sell it, no problem. But if you want it, he's bringing it to you, specifically the Mystery Man. However, get ready for this. He also serves as the spell checker and will issue citations to Sims who cast magic in front of non-magical Sims. Fines will increase with each successive offense. So this man, if you're in Magic Town, first of all, he brings the magic to you. He brings it to you. He says, hey bitches, you want to learn about some magic? Be tempted. And he is in Magic Town. So if you're in Magic Town, he is incredibly helpful and will sell you things, and he has wands. However, he's also there to fucking keep you in check, which I think is very upsetting and disturbing and creepy. I don't like that we've gone from having an entire town of supernaturals that just like mingle and exist with each other and also non-occult Sims, and Sims having access to alchemy, having access to potions and elixirs where they can literally change themselves to be an occult or change their personality or clone themselves. Like, we had so much access to magic, free range, unchecked, to now having a spell checker who, if you are caught on a non-magical lot, so outside of Magic Town where everything seems to be centered and contained, for better or for worse, now there's a spell checker that comes and gets you and fines you, and the fines increase the more you do magic in front of non-magic Sims. Now that could be a safety thing. Maybe something bad happened that one of the occults did in the 15 to 25 years between The Sims 3 and The Sims 1. Or it's a containment thing. It's the sim government of Sim Nation being gross and weird, just like they've done to multiple people of color, nationalities, races throughout the entirety of American history. And The Sims is very American. It was made in America, baby. So we're going to talk a little more about the neighborhoods in Making Magic and in Magic Town. So Creepy Hollow, the 3 available lots must be purchased with magic coins as well as simoleons. So I did say that already. But also, all of the lots available in Creepy Hollow have a spooky theme with a dark terrain, a creepy themed mailbox and garbage can, and ominous wind-blowing sounds replacing cheerful bird noises in Old Town. So if you're choosing to live in Creepy Hollow, you've already made the financial decision, but have you made the, like, bravery decision of wanting to live in places that are very distinctly different than the other neighborhoods that you can access within the world of The Sims 1? They made a point. They made a point to say this shit's different and it's haunted. You can also get magical growths on these lots, and these are the only lots that allow magical growths, like only residential lots. I believe there's still access on the magical growths still appear on community lots, but these are the only residential lots in the entire game where you can get magical growths. Magical growths are the special objects that can automatically appear when a family has cast 15 spells or charms while living in a residential neighborhood, or 10 in Magic Town. Okay, so I lied to you. They can appear on other things, but you need to, like, really put in the effort, when in Magic Town you can just be fucking around and then you can get them a little bit faster. Spells and charms cast by adult family members count. Ones cast by children do not count. So if you're trying to get magical growths on your lot and you have a child sim and an adult sim that are both casting spells and charms, the ones cast by children don't count at all. So this brings in the mentality that I talked about in the first part of this video, where maybe a lot of what happened with the criminalization of occults and everything was a very, like, think of the children, what about the children's safety kind of thing. But you will see, the more I talk about The Sims 1 and Making Magic, the kids, again, are fucking fine. You're using them as your scapegoat to defend criminalizing magic. It's getting a little too real in here. It's getting a little too realistic. All right, let's talk about Calamity Forest. Calamity Forest is where the carnival has come into town. It's also where a lot of the community lots are, where they are shops. There's ones that are a little more, like, foresty, fairy themed. There are ones that are very, like, haunted, and I think one of the names of the community lots is, like, a haunted place or something. So Calamity Forest, okay, get ready for this. Children can go to Magic Town by themselves if they jump in a hole in the ground. Kids cannot buy magical ingredients, so for them, Magic Town is simply a place for fun. Mind you, Magic Town has a fucking carnival in Calamity Forest. I think it has 2. I think there's one that's, like, a bit darker and, like, doom and gloom, and then there's the fucking clown one. I hated that shit. I never had The Sims Making Magic, and when I was little, I was happy that I didn't have The Sims Making Magic because the clown shit freaked me out. Kids can enjoy all attractions except for the Wishing Well and Charming the Snake, which, like, fair enough. I feel like both of those have a lot of, like, Charming the Snake feels very dangerous, literally just for the fact that, like, if you're a little kid and you don't have, like, the discipline and the concentration that I feel is needed to charm a snake, you can get bit. And also the Wishing Well, especially if we're looking at it in, like, the sense of The Sims 4, like, let's finally talk about The Sims 4. If you're looking at the Wishing Well in The Sims 4, you can wish for money, you can wish for beauty, you can wish for, like, aging down, you can wish to have a child who it only exists as a ghost unless you heal them. Like, you can do a lot with the Wishing Well. So the fact that kids aren't able to access the Wishing Well either, I think is, like, a good thing that that's not allowed. And clearly that's a rule in Magic Town. Again, whether the rule is made by the residents of Magic Town, so the occults that maybe for whatever reason either chose to or had to distance themselves from non-occult Sims, or the apparent lawmakers, the mystery man who's putting citations on people for performing magic. For whatever reason, kids are not able to access the Wishing Well, and I think that's a good decision because of how much can be done with the Wishing Well. Kids can't be responsible for that kind of thing. They can also buy popcorn and cotton candy, but cannot buy goulash or gumbo. Those are interesting. The Sims Wiki did not have any insight to the goulash or the gumbo, and it's not spelled goulash like ghoul, which I thought was going to be like the pun there. So I wonder if it's more like expense or like flavor. But I think it's kind of weird that kids can't access this goulash or gumbo. And it didn't have anything about either one of those where it didn't give like a history or like a lore tidbit. So part of me is like, oh, maybe it's just like costs more than like popcorn and cotton candy, which is like should be like pocket money. But I'm suspicious. And I'm like, I wonder if there's something though. I wonder if there's like magic in it or something that they're trying to keep kids safe from. I don't know. So I said in Calamity Forest that there is the carnival and everything, the two different types of carnival, but there's also the lots where they're essentially shops. There's NPCs with like stalls, and you can go places and shop and do like fun and games, but you can shop there. So Sims can buy ingredients for baking, pressing nectar, spell casting, and even acquire an egg that will hatch into a dragon. And in The Sims 3, we said that a black dragon can curse you into zombieism, but you can't get dragons unless you have Dragon Valley. So Dragon Valley seemed like a very contained, like singular place. And I believe it was like on a different timeline than like what the Sims 3 base game and like Supernatural were supposed to be. So it's giving very like Game of Thrones, which is nuts because I'm pretty sure The Sims 1 was out before Game of Thrones. Was it out before the books though? I don't know. But the fact that you can only get dragons in Magic Town and you can buy an egg that needs to be hatched. It's giving very Game of Thrones, which I like that's kind of cool, especially with House of the Dragon out now and like us learning that the eggs Rhaenyra gives to Bela, that's her name, are the same eggs that like Daenerys gets however many hundreds or thousands of years later. It's giving me that kind of vibe. Like, were these eggs that you can purchase from Magic Town from Dragon Valley but like dormant? I like that. Sims can freely cast spells in Magic Town without danger of receiving a citation from the Mystery Man. So you are safe in Magic Town to cast spells. You're safe, but only in Magic Town. Now, I want to talk about some of the NPCs, and I'm only going to talk about 3 of them because, again, it was in real life. The in real life reason behind it is there was not a lot that could be done with The Sims 1 by the time it was out and published and everything. Games were still fighting for their lives to get like a lot more included. However, in lore, in history, in what we're talking about, the fact that there are only 3 NPCs, and when I talk about them, you're going to understand more what I'm saying. There's only 3 NPCs that have a supernatural existence background to them, and it makes you wonder what the hell happened. So, first I want to talk about Fairy Queen Mara. Now, when you know that The Sims 1 came out in 2000, and I believe Make and Magic came out in 2003, 2005, it'll be up here. I'm not trying to keep dates checked. But Make and Magic came out. So Fairy Queen Mara, in like game publishing context, was the first fairy we've ever had. However, when you look at it within the story that we're talking about, what we're saying, 15 to 25 year jump from The Sims 3 to The Sims 1. She is the only fairy left. And she is the last fairy for the rest of the franchise. That's kind of scary. Especially if you're thinking about it in the sense of like, they've been criminalized, they've been hunted down, they've been ostracized, they've been attacked, they've been segregated. That's the word. They've been segregated off to their own area where they're heavily monitored, and it's very like there's people checking to make sure that magic isn't like leaking into like the non-segregated areas. She is the only fairy for the rest of the franchise. Fairies in The Sims 3, other than playing goofy tricks, they do not have power to inflict real harm and damage. They can piss people off for a while, but they can't cast the spells that witches can cast. They can learn elixirs, but so can everybody. So why are the fairies completely wiped out? Anyway, Fairy Queen Mara is the hardest to beat at toadstool races, but she's very easy to beat at duels. And she gives you Pegasus feathers as quest rewards. That's fucking spooky. Even Mara seems incredibly harmless. So why is she the last fairy that we know of? She could be the last fairy alive, point blank, period, but why is she the last fairy that we know of for the rest of the franchise? That's fucking scary. Spoiler alert for the next part. There are Sims that could be fairies in The Sims 2, but they could be fairies in the sense of 20, 30, 40 generations down, to the point where like the Fae blood, the Fae DNA is just so muddled that like you wouldn't call them a fairy over just calling them a normal Sim. So that's fucked up. And maybe they're the descendants of Mara. They could be. Oh my god, wait, they could be. I didn't even think of that. I can't wait to get into part 3. Okay, let's finish part 2 first. I have this guy written down. It's Apothecary Todd. It doesn't say that he's any sort of supernatural, any sort of occult. Personal theory, I think he's a witch. I think he's a witch. I think he's a spellcaster. So Apothecary Todd, he has his wagon o' wares. And he is the most common vendor that's seen out and about in Magic Town. And pretty much every lot in Magic Town that you go to, he will be at. Fairy Queen Mara is only at 2 or 3. She doesn't go to other ones. And our last NPC, same thing, only seen at 2 or 3, but doesn't go to... The first and the last NPC we're talking about, they don't interact. They don't really go to the same lots except for one. Apothecary Todd goes to all of them. He's everywhere. And I feel like that's kind of relating to like real life. I feel like witches and like stories of witches are a little more in everywhere, while like certain cultures have more stories about fairies versus more stories about mermaids. You know what I mean? I feel like there's stories in every real world culture about a little bit of every kind of occult, but some of them have like more stories about mermaids than they do about fairies. Apothecary Todd is in the middle. I think he's a witch, personally. I think he's a spellcaster. And then we have Vicky Vampirus, probably one of my favorites. One of the Sims stories that I've read forever and has never been updated past like 2020. Depressingly, probably even before then, says that Lolita Goth is the mother of Vicky Vampirus, and that is canon in my head. Lolita Goth we're not going to talk about at all, and I didn't talk about her at all, because while the Goth family throughout history of the franchise, of the in-game lore, of their existence, are very like Addams Family leaning, they have never been definite occults other than the ones in Moonlight Falls that are ghosts, because technically that's an occult, but also that's just like a way of life in The Sims. Is like the dead come back all the time as ghosts. The spirits visit all the time. They are considered occults, but I don't define them as occults, if that makes sense. So the Goths have always been like very Addams Family leaning, but they're not specifically like, they don't have a history of like spellcaster. Not legitimate ones, at least. Not a legitimate history. So didn't talk about Lolita Goth, because that's just for like an overall Sims theory video, very much the iceberg and very much Izzy's videos. I'm getting so warm. You know why? Because there's a big light on me and my room is toasty warm. My room is toasty warm for the first time like all season. So I didn't talk about Lolita Goth at all, but my personal headcanon and canon is that she is the mother of Vicky Vampirus. So Vicky Vampirus, only surviving vampire in the time skip. She is the only vampire we see, very much like Fairy Queen Mara. However, maybe spoiler for the next part, but also like if you play the Sims franchise, you know, there are vampires in The Sims 2. There are definitely vampires in The Sims 2. Like whether or not they're NPCs or like playable characters, they are there and they exist. However, Vicky Vampirus at the time of The Sims 1 is the only surviving vampire. Again, maybe they're in hiding, but like maybe she's literally the only one left. And that's scary. To think about how there was like an extermination of like a lot of supernaturals, and especially ones that couldn't like necessarily fly under the radar. Like I think Apothecary Todd is a spellcaster. I think the Mystery Man is maybe a spellcaster. He's somebody very powerful, clearly. Mara is the fairy queen. She has wings. You can't hide wings necessarily. Vicky Vampirus, look at her. Look at her fucking picture. You think that bitch can hide? So if other vampires at the time of the time skip, the 15 to 25 years, looked like Vicky Vampirus, they're probably easy to find and hunt down. Woo, I moved my camera. They're very easy to find and hunt down, probably. So, most of the items available from her stand are related to dragons. So Vicky Vampirus is not only the only fucking vampire that we got, but she's also the dragon woman. Rhaenyra, what happened to you, babe? As she can give wizard eyelashes as a quest reward. Oh, did I say Apothecary Todd gives clown confetti as a quest reward? Do you think Vicky takes the Apothecary Todd's eyelashes? And that's what she's selling. So really quickly, we're going to go back to Creepy Hollow and talk about the lots that are available. Because I think the lots maybe have not insight to what happened necessarily, but maybe insight to show that Magic Town isn't just made by occults to feel safe and feel, okay, you know, for whatever reason they're beefing with us, so we gotta go into our own place. I think the description of the lots in Creepy Hollow that are available tell us more that Magic Town was created for occults in not a nice way. So first you have Alfred's B&B. This dilapidated, defunct boarding house is ready for some tender loving care and a good tile cleaner. So dilapidated, defunct, boarding house, which I think is super interesting. So clearly it's in disarray. It's beginning to be in ruin. It's not being cared for. It's not being taken care of. Nobody's been there for a long time. Nobody's cared to do any of the cleaning or the repairs of it. Where people perhaps run out of Alfred's B&B, Airbnb. Don't support Airbnb. Why is it dilapidated and defunct? And as a boarding house, how many occults were living there? Then you have Ever After Oaks. This mansion hosted many gala events for the most exclusive members of Magic Town society. But rest assured, which why do we need an assurance? All have been sent back to for whence they came. Why do we need an assurance that they've been sent back? If this was a place where gala events were being held for Magic Town society, why do we need to be rest assured that they're not there anymore? Who are we assuring that they're not there anymore? Old Man Lum's. This ancient cabin, has remained vacant for generations. Why? Its first and only inhabitant, Old Man Lum, was driven insane by his experiments with enchantments, which, okay, I'll give you that one, non-occults who hate the occult Sims. Science and magic. Mixin'. Doesn't always have positives. And was last seen wandering the streets of Old Town, muttering something about flamingos. It can't always be the non-occult's fault. I just think it most of the time is. But Old Man Lum seems like he is getting into stuff that maybe he shouldn't be. We're going to round this section off talking about magic, specifically the spells and charms that are available to you in The Sims 1 Making Magic. Because we talked about the occults, the elixirs, their, like, occult abilities, and we specifically talked about spellcasters, who were the most interesting, what's the word? Like, they're paid more attention to, there's more to them than other occults. So any sim can become magical by obtaining a magic wand. Who uses wands? Who used magic wands 15 to 25 years ago? Spellcasters? Who are the most powerful and influential and seemingly like the ones that like have the most to them? Spellcasters. Who has to use magic wands to cast spells until they've gained enough lifetime rewards to work with their hands? Spellcasters, babe. To make a magical sim non-magical, they can sell their wand to the mystery man, which will remove all spells in their inventory and prevent them from using magic. So why is magic so centered around magic wands now? Why can you only do magic if you have access to a magic wand? And why, as soon as you get rid of your magic wand or you lose your magic wand for whatever reason, literally all spells and everything are stripped from you? And it says it's removed from their inventory, but I have a feeling that if you sell your magic wand because you're giving up your occultness, your power, reverting back from a spellcaster to a human, why is it essentially erased from your memory? The ability to do magic. Why is that? Sims need to collect ingredients to create spells and charms. Some ingredients are harder to obtain than others, making some magic more difficult to produce. So again, Sims 3. Anybody could perform alchemy. Anybody could do alchemy. Some ingredients to create elixirs were harder to get than others, but anybody had access to alchemy. Now, you are wholly dependent on your magic. If you have a wand and specific ingredients, you can only do things if you have the ingredients on hand. With the elixirs, you could make some without any ingredients at all. I'm pretty sure it's only like the Vial of Bliss. Or that's the one that where the ingredients are like, they're laying around in your kitchen. Like literally just open the fridge and you probably have them. Now, magical ingredients are only in Magic Town. That is the only place you can get them. I'm not surprised, but I'm suspicious. So spells specifically, the magic of The Sims 1 is split into spells and charms. There's not elixirs. There's not spells, there's not a magical meter, there's not levels to your magical meter. It literally is just spells or charms, which you can only do if you have the ingredients and a wand, mind you. Only can do it that way. There's a lot of restrictions. There's a lot of restrictions to the magic. So adult Sims have access to 10 spells, children only have access to 3. So you have to age and be older to access more of the spells. The spells include Totification, we've already talked about that. Relationship Boost, Banish, both say what they do on the tin. Relationship Boost helps you make friends. Banish kicks somebody off the lot. Love Struck, Love Potion, makes people fall in love with you. Hypnotize, same thing. You hypnotize somebody, you make them do what you want to do. It's the voodoo doll without the doll. There's also Enchant, where you can bring certain inanimate objects to life. Remember when we talked about Old Man Lum? And how he went crazy muttering something about flamingos? If you cast Enchant on a plastic flamingo lawn ornament, it turns into a flamingo-go dancer. Honestly, probably my favorite NPCs ever. And the flamingo-go dancers just thrive. They're living their lives. They're having the best time. And I literally love that for them. You can also make a fucking garden gnome, but I can't stand those little fuckers, so who cares about the garden gnomes, to be quite honest with you. Now let's talk about charms. Same thing. Adults have access to 11 of the charms, children only have access to 6. The thing about charms is the spells are specifically cast with the wand, but charms are things that you can... I didn't look into this part, but you can either purchase them or create them. But you can only use 11 of them. You can use 11 of them as an adult, but you can only access 6 of them if you're a child. But the charms that you can get are Horn of Plenty, which generates food. That's fairly beneficial. Who doesn't love that? Reign of Riches. Okay, we're getting a little sillier now. We're getting into territory where that can be abused. Generates treasure boxes and piles of jewels that you can then sell and then easy money. Shed Your Skin can turn your sim into a ghost. However, the fact that it's called Shed Your Skin is kind of fucking scary. Clone Drone. We've seen Clone Drone before. It creates an exact clone of the caster. Again, that's where things get a little dicey. That's where things get a little scary. This one is one that I'm very interested in because it's called Beauty or Beast. Talked about Fairy Queen Mara. We talked about Vicky Vampirus. Speculated about Apothecary Todd in the Mystery Man. There's no confirmation. There's no definitive that's what a spellcaster is. Because the only spellcasters, the only witches in The Sims 1 are people that are using a wand. who opened their mystery box and are using their wand. However, I think a spellcaster is somebody with that magical blood in them, similar to a fairy and a vampire. So just because you have a wand and are casting magic, to me, that does not mean you're a spellcaster. What a spellcaster is if you have that blood, you have that magical blood, you have that inherent magical power. They're just calling anybody spellcasters these days, right? So this one is very interesting to me for a lot of reasons. Beauty or Beast temporarily changes the appearance of the caster. That word specifically, appearance. Let me get into it. The monsters that you can turn into with the Beauty or Beast charm. Werewolf, which again, there are none in The Sims 1. Vampire. Witch. Headless Horseman. Okay, pop off. Troll. Crone. Hunchback. Minotaur. Nymph. And Genie. One of these monsters that you can turn into, I believe it's going to be the Headless Horseman, because I don't think your sim is actually headless. I think maybe it's just a pumpkin head. But one of these, whichever one, it's like by chance. I think there's like a percentage of each one that you could be. One of these heavily resembles what we would maybe call a zombie. And again, werewolf and zombie present in The Sims 3, not present in The Sims 1. And mind you, in The Sims 3, that being a zombie was only a temporary life state. And it goes away with either a sunlight charm from a spellcaster or after 48 hours, even if you're risen from the dead by a spellcaster. There's no zombies at all. And there's no werewolves. Where did the werewolves go? The Beauty and the Beast charm only changes your appearance. It does not make you an occult. It's just you cosplaying as an occult. And cosplaying as an occult by using a charm that anybody who purchases a magical item can access and use, that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. There is no confirmed spellcasters. The only visible occults and confirmed occults are merchants in a town that can be very easily ignored, accessible through kind of tricky means. That leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The effects of the charm aren't even like mystical in any way because it can be reversed by taking a shower or changing an outfit. So here we are in The Sims 1 with Magic Town, which I think, canonically to me, is Moonlight Falls, 15 to 25 years later. We have very little occults left. And who is left are possibly the last members of their species as of this point in The Sims 1. There are vampires later, we know this, and perhaps they're mostly descendants from Vicky Vampirus because, again, she's the only one we visibly have access to. There could be vampires in hiding, there could be fairies in hiding, maybe the werewolves are in hiding, maybe they were especially chased off because they're seen as violent. I don't know. But that's where we're at in The Sims 1. And now, in part 3, we're going to see 25 years later where you can see them. There are more occults visible, but they're drastically different from The Sims 1 and especially The Sims 3. 15 to 25 years is a very long time for a lot of historical things to happen. And it doesn't seem like a far enough time skip. Like, even I'm saying it, and it doesn't feel like a far enough time skip to claim events that happen in that time could be historical, but they can be. Something happened in that time, in the 15 to 25 years, for us to go from Moonlit Falls, which is an established town with a government, with a military system, with schools and neighborhoods and people and, like, families. What happened to the Van Golds? And the wolves, what happened to them? Because there's only one vampire and there's no werewolves. What happened to these influential families that founded that town? And now the only access to magic we have is through a carnival. I don't like that. I don't like that we went from a whole town to something very commercial and silly and seen as fun and probably not taken seriously. And now we have another 25-year time skip that's coming up. So even then, what becomes of these occults? I still uphold the theory that spellcasters and aliens, whether intentional or through the lens of like prejudice and being criminalized, are the reason as to why occults are so seen as other. And I think The Sims 2 and The Sims 3 offer the most evidence to that theory. But I think The Sims 1 is the most blatant display of like what happens when the occults are segregated, ostracized, criminalized. Because it seems like before they could do anything. They had their established town, and now it seems like they're relegated to being sideshow freaks with the carnival, simple merchants, essentially. Like, not to look down on anybody running a small business. Like, Vicky and Mara, pop off with your small business queens. However, small business versus established community feels a little, you know? I'll see you in part 3. Okay, we're here. We're in part 3. We're now talking about The Sims 2. Probably the game that I have the most memories with and of. And also, arguably, as somebody who has played every single Sims game, the best. But now we're in The Sims 2 where we are 50 years away from The Sims 3, where the supernaturals were around just like every day. They're just living their lives. And aliens kind of just like come and hang out. And they'll abduct you later if you keep being insistent about like investigating them essentially and like having space rocks in your inventory, but otherwise just kind of like hang out. We're 50 years later, and all of the supernaturals and occults and aliens in The Sims 2, comparatively to The Sims 3 and The Sims 1, are all mostly in hiding / laying low. Like they're not a dime a dozen hanging around. They're really not. Most of them kind of lay low. The ones that do make themselves public are like, it's very specific instances, essentially, when they make themselves public and they make themselves like out in the open. And a lot of them have devolved, ceased to exist, or are kind of very aggressive towards like non-occult Sims. So let's talk about that. So the first couple things that I have, we're not going straight into the occults in my notes. The first couple things we're going to talk about are important locations, 2 of which I don't think are that important, but I still thought they were interesting enough to discuss. The first one I want to talk about is Water Vista Place, which if you have The Sims 2 Apartment Life, or is it just Apartments? I think it's Apartments Lives. The neighborhood you get, Belladonna Cove, weirdly enough, was also the neighborhood in which like witches were introduced, because Apartment Life is how witches were packaged for The Sims 2. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't think we've ever had an explanation. Will Wright, if you're watching this, come out of Sims retirement for 2 seconds and answer this question. Please. We're all begging. The editing is going to cut this out, but I have said this name fast, quote unquote, 6 or 7 times, and I literally cannot do it. So if I sound silly sitting here, like, enunciating each, enunciating each part of this title, it's because if I don't, I get like tongue-tied, there's like a lisp. So Water Vista Place is a specific lot in the neighborhood of Belladonna Cove that is not accessible from the map. you have to use camera cheats, or you have to like really, I think it's specifically which is camera cheats. I don't think there's another way to get to it. But using camera cheats, you can kind of twist your camera because it's literally outside of like the sphere you have and are allowed with the camera in The Sims 2. But Water Vista Place, it is a replica of Baba Yaga's hut, complete with chicken feet, can only be seen with tab or camera mod, assumed to be an Easter egg, and it's witch related. So the way that it looks like chicken feet, it's like a little hut that's just, it's a weird shape. Their picture will be up. But the chicken feet are like, I think it's just pillars that the creators of this lot used, and then like dirt to make the chicken feet. But yeah, it's a little like Easter egg of Baba Yaga's hut, which I think is super, super cool. That's one of my favorite things. As soon as I learned about it and like how to get to it, I went to it and needed to have Sims living there. I didn't even care that it was inconvenient, because it is inconvenient. It's a very tiny lot, especially for me who does like mostly family gameplay and like legacy gameplay, as we know. It's inconvenient, but it's also so cool. Another thing I want to talk about, like, again, this lot isn't like super important. I don't know why I made notes of these other than I just thought they were interesting. It doesn't actually, I don't think they actually go really into my theory that like witches and aliens are the main cause of why occults are like ostracized and villainized. Ostracized, is that the word I was looking for? Previous parts? Last part? The one before? I don't know. But these are just locations that I thought were very interesting. So the House of Fallen Leaves, which if you have The Sims 2 Nightlife, it comes with the downtown sub-neighborhood. It is haunted by, it's a house that, the family that lived there, they're split up. They're all dead. It's the Tricot family. I never know how to pronounce it, but I believe Tricot is correct. The Tricot family lived there. They're all dead. And they're split up now. Most of them are in the graveyard that's in The Sims 2 Nightlife, but there are 2 teenagers and a woman that is not related to the family that are buried at the house. The teenagers, let me get my notes so I can make sure it's Frickerith and Gavornin, I think is how you say that name. Could be French. And then a lady named Raynell that are buried there. It's a house that in The Sims 2, like in The Sims 4 now, we have like haunted houses and everything, and ghosts are about to get a big old upgrade. But we have haunted houses in The Sims 2, and we have the haunted house lot type. But The Sims 2, the House of Fallen Leaves, that was the only kind of like haunted house we had, because the lights will always flicker and they will always dim. And there will always be like sound effects kind of in the house. Like if you're playing in the House of Fallen Leaves, there'll always be like the sounds of like shit rustling and rumbling, and the lighting will never be fixed. You could delete all of the lights that are available in the house, and if you install new ones, it still is never fixed. So it's like our only instance of like a haunted house kind of vibe. And it's one of the largest lots, and it's one of the largest in the sense of like how many rooms and how many floors, but also with the camera being as like kind of primitive as it was in The Sims 2, it was very hard to see, but it has an incredibly deep basement. It's probably like, I don't know what the limit is in The Sims 2 for like building limitations. There's a word I'm looking for. Building permits? Is that what I'm looking for? But I don't know what the limitation is, but the basement is like 6 or 7 levels below the house. Like it's not just a set of stairs and then basement. It's like stairs and then the basement, and in the basement there are 2 coffins. And seeing as The Sims 2 Nightlife came with the House of Fallen Leaves and the deceased Tricot family, The Sims 2 Nightlife also came with vampires. And vampires, like the Grand Master vampires, which we will be getting into later in this part, are not accessible and like don't exist in your neighborhood unless you have The Sims 2 Nightlight installed. I'm not saying all of them were vampires. I'm saying I think some of the Tricot family were vampires. I personally think the matriarch, Jennifer, I think, yep, that's how you say her name. I personally think the matriarch was a fairy. But that's my personal opinion. The last, location I wanted to mention specifically, it is specific to witches. But it's very interesting to me how this location is. because again, you don't have access to this unless you have the Sims 2 apartment life, so you have like witches accessible to you because apparently you also have apartments accessible to you. Again, Will Wright, please just come out of retirement and answer that one question. No one will yell at you for The Sims 4. We know you're not behind this shit anymore. But there is a sub-neighborhood. So, like, Pleasant View, Veronaville, Strangetown are all neighborhoods in The Sims 2. Worlds, essentially, if you don't play the Sims series. Sub-neighborhoods would include the downtown city area, which you get in The Sims 2 Nightlife. It would include any of the vacation worlds that you can take your Sims on vacation to. It includes the open for business area where like you learn like how to run a business, essentially. It's that kind of thing, but it's specifically with apartment life, so it's specifically with witches, and it is the sub-neighborhood of magic. And the thing is, with all the other sub-neighborhoods, you can access them. Like, it's not hard. Sometimes it's money, like in the sense of the vacation worlds, it's literally just money. In the other locations, it's literally just having your sim travel there. Like, it's not difficult. You just have to, like, download it or, like, add it once it's in-game. And then you can go. Magic, the sub-neighborhood, it's just called Magic, is only accessible to witches. Only. No other occults can go. No human sims can go. No aliens can go. Literally just witches. So it's called Magic, and I keep almost wanting to call it Magic Town. And it very well could be. I don't know about this for sure. This is like, I'm not sold on this one. I'm 1000% sold that Moonlight Falls and Magic Town from The Sims 1 are the same. Like, I'm 100% sold on that. I don't know about Magic from The Sims 2, but it very well could be what's left of Magic Town from The Sims 1, so 25 years later. It could be. I don't know if I'm sold on it, because then the question is, why is there infighting, essentially, between the occults that none of the other occults have access to it? Unlike Moonlit Falls and Magic Town. You know what I mean? So I don't know how sold I am on that, because I'm not trying to look in. I'm not looking into what happened or could have happened between occults. I'm looking into what happened to separate occults and non-occults and put them in a position where they're villainized and criminalized and they're not around as much. And when they are around, they're very much opposed. You see what I'm saying? But it can only be accessed by witches. And it has 2, like, lots in it. It's literally just a strange world. I'm pretty sure I will find pictures and they'll be in the video, but I'm pretty sure it's one of the worlds that you can like build in when you create your own, where it's just a big circle with a road, but then it's mountains all around it and like completely blocks it off. There's only 2 locations that a witch specifically can travel to. The Fortress of Eternal Darkness, which is the evil alignment, which we will get into when we talk about witches, and the Palace of Never-Ending Light, which is for the good alignment, and there is no location for neutral witches. We're gonna get into the neutral witches, don't you worry. Can you hear my pages turning? So there is, again, The Sims 2, by the time of The Sims 2, all of the occults are either mostly in hiding and don't really come out unless, like, the game has them doing it. I don't know how I feel about how the witches come out and hang around. But vampires are exclusive to the downtown neighborhood. If you don't have the downtown neighborhood added to, like, Pleasant View, let's say, you're not going to be getting vampires. Aliens are base game for The Sims 2, so, like, aliens are around, but as we discussed in 1 or 2, at this point I don't remember, it'll be in editing. Obviously, you'll have seen it. But aliens are considered very relatively close to Sims, but they're not actually Sims. They are, in fact, alien to Sims. And some supernaturals and occults don't even exist by the time of The Sims 2. Or if they do, they're fully in hiding and we don't know about them. Or they've devolved, which is what we're going to also talk about. However, there is the paranormal career, which was a thing in The Sims 3. It is not a thing in The Sims 1. So, the paranormal career specifically requires a college education, majors associated with this career, which I think is super interesting. Philosophy, psychology, and physics. Okay, I think those are interesting to be the specific courses that you would take to then ideally get a paranormal career. Because The Sims 2, you can get any degree and get any job, essentially, but the ones that can, like, boost you and make you more equipped for the job, obviously, are the ones that, like, it says here are assigned. I wrote this down specifically. When you join the paranormal career, you're at level 1 and you're a psychic phone pal, which I thought was, like, kind of pulling sort of from, like, real life, where it seems very, like, something that, like, most people are skeptical of. You know what I mean? Like, some people in real life view psychics as, like, completely fake. Some of people believe that they're, like, 100% real. I don't know personally where I stand on psychics. A lot of things that I believe IRL are, like, kind of cherry-picked. Like, the idea of ghosts, I only believe certain parts of that, but not all of them. Like, reincarnation, certain things, but not all of them. Things like that. So I thought that was super funny that level 1 is psychic phone pal, but then level 10 is cult leader. I think that is very specific to the timeline that we're discussing. The timeline of 50 years from The Sims 3 to The Sims 2, where occult and supernatural Sims are very much ostracized at this point. I don't think that it's, like, legitimate cult leader. I think if you're in the paranormal career, then most other Sims are going to assume that you're a supernatural fan or you're supernatural yourself, and no matter what you're actually doing at the level 10 of the paranormal career, most outside non-occult Sims are going to look at you as a cult leader. Because it's something they can't explain, and it's something they see as other and different and weird and maybe scary. Personal opinion. I don't know if that's, like, true, but I think that's the view of The Sims. I'm actually a Sim, and I came to life, and I'm telling you all exactly what the real deal is. The interesting thing about the paranormal career, I think, when it's related to occult specifically, is the career reward you get. You unlock it at level 5, and at level 5 you're a medium. It is the Resurrectonometron. At price ranging from 0 to 10,000 simoleons, you can give no money or you can give up to 10,000 simoleons. A Sim might bring dead Sims back to life. The Grim Reaper might bring back Sims to life like normal, with some problems, as a zombie, or not at all. So then it's an immediate segue into zombies. I have the list of occults that we talked about in The Sims 3 because it was much more expansive in The Sims 3. We talked about them in The Sims 1, so now we are going to talk about each individual occults that I've spoken about before. Again, ghosts are not included. I didn't speak about genies in any of this, even though they've been present in all 3 games. If you would like, put in the comments, leave a like on this video, whatever. If you would like, there are other, not specifically occults, but other types of Sims that are, I wrote them down, and I had meant to do, like, research on them. That way I could talk about them in this video. But I also don't think they're incredibly prevalent to, like, the specific theory I have, which is witches and aliens being the main reason, or one of the main reasons why occults are so ostracized in the Sims series. So if at any point you would like me to talk about Bonehilda, the tragic clown, the matchmaker, the genie, like maybe ghosts as well, let me know, because I did say that I didn't really want to necessarily talk about, like, servos or plumbots, plant Sims, because to me, for what I was going for in this conversation, those are not, I guess, related. Like, I don't know, maybe plant Sims do have some stake in this, but I'm not talking about any of them. So if at any point you guys would like me to do research and, like, add to this theory, or you guys have done research and want to add to this theory as well, let me know, because I can make another video. This one just is going to be too long already. So immediately segueing into zombies. This was a very specific thing on the Sims Wiki that I really would like to, like, read word for word and point out. If the Resurrectonometron is given 998 to 4,127 simoleons, so a very specific price range, the resurrection will fail and the Sim will be revived as a zombie. A deceased Sim can become a zombie if a Sim makes a genie wish to resurrect them and the wish fails, which is another way to become a zombie. The evil witch spell is cast Viviscus Zombie. Those are ways that you can all become a zombie. So in the very specific price range of using the Resurrectonometron, your resurrection request will fail and they will become a zombie. They will also become a zombie if a sim makes a wish to a genie and that wish fails, and also if evil witches cast zombie spell time. So, again, witches are being saved till the end of this segment, but again, it's already showing that like their power is like kind of ooky spooky compared to the rest of them. Another thing that's on the Sims wiki that is very, very specific, and again, I'm putting towards my theory of like, not a theory, but the discussion throughout this video, where I think a lot of the criminalization of occult Sims is based around, what about the children? What about the kids? Just like people tend to do in real life with other things. Very specific points on the Sims wiki. Babies, toddlers, and children cannot become zombies under any circumstances. And this goes for the occults for the rest of The Sims 2. I'm gonna say it now because in The Sims 3 we discussed how some like occult children will show some signs. Like which children, their toys will go missing, or their toys will like move around without them being an imaginary friend. Baby fairies will like have the wings, or they'll at least have the glow behind them. I always had the glow behind them, but the wiki does say that they don't have wings, which I'm like, ah. Baby vampires will have like the glowing eyes and everything, and they will have like the teeth, like the kids will have the teeth. Child werewolves in The Sims 3 are able to transform. Like, by the time of The Sims 2, it's like, don't worry, they're fucking fine. They cannot be affected. Pets can become zombies, but their appearance and walk style does not change, because when a sim is a zombie, they specifically have, like, they walk like this, and they, like, shuffle along and drag one foot. It's a whole thing. Sims who died pregnant, The Sims 2, if you've never played The Sims 2 and you're, like, only coming in at The Sims 4, The Sims 2 was the Wild West of the Sims franchise. Sims who died pregnant will eventually give birth, but the baby will always be normal, which I also think is super interesting. What science or what magic or whatever is making sure that that's a thing? That by now, if something happens where a sim is a zombie, it's guaranteed that if they were pregnant and they do give birth, their baby will also not suffer the effects of zombieism. I think that's something we need to look into. For zombies, physical appearance and movement suffer greatly. They will lose most, if not all, of their skills and will have a fixed personality. So it doesn't matter what your personality was in The Sims 2. If you turn into a zombie, get brought back as a zombie, whatever, your personality will be outgoing 4, active 3, playful 1. Fixed personality. Lower daily and lifetime relationships with the sim who brought them back. So any zombie that's brought back to life by like a relative. So like, let's say you're a sim who loses their partner and you're so absolutely devastated, but losing a partner is also losing income. So you're not able to give, pay the Resurrectonometron the full 10,000 simoleons, and you pay within that very specific price range. Your lover is brought back as a zombie. They're not happy to see you. They would rather be fucking dead, is essentially what it says. They are sterile and cannot conceive children, which, we're not talking about real world implications here. I know I keep bringing them up, but we're not talking about real world implications. Is that a very specific thing that has been genetically altered, engineered, experimented with within the Sims world? I feel like Cersei Beaker would know. Somebody call her up. See what her research is looking like. I need to be friends with Plumbella immediately because I feel like that's something her and I can discuss. Zombies will occasionally think about brains, but they cannot consume them or convert other Sims. So I do think this is like a side theory off of a side theory. Like, I needed a whiteboard with red dots to connect because I didn't connect shit, but I've connected them. I'm thinking, just based off of the research of The Sims 2, but that by the time of The Sims 2, which again is 50 years after The Sims 3 takes place, that zombies have been experimented on. And the zombies that we have are a form of occult in The Sims 2, but also are so genetically modified or have been experimented on or whatever, that they are not like their most natural, I'm going to say, form that they could be, that they were in The Sims 3. Because that's interesting that they cannot convert other Sims to zombies. They cannot genetically pass down the zombieism, and they cannot have children if they were not pregnant prior. Or if it's a Sim that can help create children, cannot create children. Zombies are immortal and will never age, but teenage zombies are eligible for the Undead Educational Scholarship. Going to college will automatically turn them into a young adult, just like it happens with all Sims in The Sims 2, and then aging out of college, graduating, will turn them into adults, just like what happens in The Sims 2 for any other teen. So zombie teens do not get special treatment. They will age up. But as soon as they're adults, they stop aging, and they just have to exist as zombies. A thing that I have highlighted and, like, starred, there is no in-game cure for zombieism. The only way to cure a Sim of zombieism, once you've resurrected them or cast a spell on them or had a failed genie wish, the only way to cure a Sim of zombieism is to use cheats, which is nuts to me. Because I think that further explains my side theory of, like, genetic testing, engineering, tampering by whatever science has, like, risen up over this time and taken over, like, magic and occults. Because what do you mean I can't cure them unless there's cheats? Now, we're leaving zombies, and we're going into our next occult, which if you have watched the other parts of this video, if you wanted to skip around, that's fine. I did put timestamps for a reason. But I've got in a specific order when I've talked about occults in the other two parts of this video. And if you need a refresher because this video is so fucking long, or you're skipping around, next we're talking about fairies. But before we talk about fairies for The Sims 2, we have to talk about Veronaville. Veronaville is one of the neighborhoods that come in The Sims 2 base game, and it is specifically, like, it literally is Romeo and Juliet. If you've never played before, it's Romeo and Juliet. You have the Caps and the Monties on different sides of town. You have Juliet Cap, you have Romeo Monty. It's a Shakespearean play. Somebody was, like, on that shit, and I 1000% relate to it. Whoever was, like, one of the main creative people behind Veronaville for The Sims 2, I love you. I see you. We are the same. But one of the families, there's several pre-made, whether they're in the neighborhood already or in, like, the neighborhood box, Caps and Monties, several members of the family. There's also the Summer Dream family. It's Tatiana, Oberon, Puck, and Bottom. They are based on the Shakespearean play A Midsummer Night's Dream, specifically in the character names, but also through their family tree, through Tatiana's and Oberon's family tree. When you go up and look into it, all of the family members are named after either, like, very fae wording or legends or creatures, or also, like, other Shakespearean plays. It says in the Summer Dream family description, could be considered fairies as they feature physical traits such as pointy ears. So they could be seen as fairies, and I think maybe a family member or two at the top of the available family tree for both Oberon and Tatiana could have been a fairy. But as I said, after The Sims 3, you jump 15 to 25 years to The Sims 1, and Fairy Queen Mara is the only visible fairy that we can see. She has wings. After that, another 25 years later, if my theory is that the Summer Dream family are in fact fairies or have fae blood, just like I believe Jennicor from the Tricot family is a fairy or has fairy blood. However, both the Tricot matriarch and the Summer Dream family are so far down the line of lineage that if they do have fae blood, it's like a drop in a bucket kind of thing. It's somewhere in there. I'm sure there's some sort of the magic that they can access, but it's so watered down and depleted by the time of The Sims 2 that, like, can we call them fairies? Or do you just have fairy lineage? Do you get what I'm saying? I personally think the summer dreams are fairies, but other than the physical appearance of like the pointy ears, that's all. I don't think they have. Tatiana and Oberon probably could have access to like the well of power that like would be within you, but I don't know. It's hard to tell. I think they're fairies, but they're really all we have left. Because Jennifer has pointy ears, but like that's literally all we know about her. And I think even if you resurrect her, there's not like anything more other than the pointy ears that you can like use. The summer dreams do have, though, the way they dress, the way they do their makeup, the way they behave, and like their home and their, I guess, like practices, because they're not married, but they have adopted 2 children in The Sims 2, and that's not that that's fucking weird, but at the time of The Sims 2 being the only family essentially that's not married but has both parents and has children, that is considered weird and other. Especially in The Sims 2 where occults are so ostracized, that is like an odd thing. And maybe it's better that people don't know their fairies. It's so funny because for The Sims 2, each section is like, I don't really want to spoil it. Each section is like significantly shorter for each occult, and that just tells you more. So next we're going to get into werewolves. And werewolves in The Sims 2 are only accessible with pets. If you have The Sims 2 pets, that's how you're able to get them. And this is the occult that every time I say some cults have devolved, this specifically is the occult that I am saying have devolved in the 50 years. Sims can only become werewolves when bitten by the leader of the pack, which is a specific wolf that you get in The Sims 2 pets. It's like a townie wolf, can only be adopted through cheats. It is a large wolf that only appears at night, distinguishable by its dark coat, heavy build, and characteristic glowing eyes. This is not a random stray that you can adopt. This is not just like a dog that passes by and digs up your yard. This is specifically the leader of the pack. So to me, that is a werewolf sim that for whatever reason, whatever history there is, either they're the evolution of like humans and like occults, whatever, either that evolution has just gone backwards, essentially. They lost the ability to walk on 2 legs. They're back to 4. They've lost their humanoid features. They're back to like fully animal. That's the leader of the pack. And that's the only way to become a werewolf in The Sims 2. There's no other way. Getting bit by the leader of the pack, or you can savage someone, which I don't like that language. You can savage another sim if you're also a werewolf. Like if you've been turned into a werewolf, you can savage another sim, which if it's a family member, it's like seen as like haha funny silly, but you can attack like random sims and like forcibly turn them into werewolves because of that. Which I don't like. I don't like that. If anybody follows is it Simply Kenna or is it Kenna the Mouse Slayer? I don't remember because they've used both, but I've talked about Kenna before in previous like videos, not Sims videos, but just like other videos I've made. And it's really funny that this is like the video I wanted to make for this month, because throughout this month, Kenna has a degree in film and like film analysis. And their specific, like one of their favorite things to talk about is like the history of monsters and monsters in film and media. And more so than you think. Like, I feel like some of us have like a basic knowledge of it, but more so than you think, each like occult, each supernatural that exist in most forms of medias are based off of like very specific racial related things. And zombies specifically, I kind of have said is like based off of Black people and like Black struggles and Black experiences. Vampires are usually aligned with like white people. So I need to watch more of their videos before I can really get into like the real world implications and like the trend through media. But I don't like that werewolves have an ability called Savage. That makes me feel gross and weird, you know? So for werewolves specifically in The Sims 2, they will transform every night. They'll transform every night, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Energy shoots up, hunger will plummet like nuts. They don't usually starve, but their hunger will go crazy down. Their personality will slowly shift to 0 neatness, 10 outgoing, 10 active, 10 playfulness, 0 niceness. Why are their personalities changing? Just because they turn into a werewolf. Knowledge Sims will naturally aspire to werewolf-related wants. Being turned into a werewolf will always appear as a negative trait, as a negative memory. So it doesn't matter if your sim is a knowledge sim that is like, I want to be a werewolf, I need to learn what this is like. It will always come up as a negative memory. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the werewolves now, what is the word I'm looking for? Primitive, but I feel like primitive is like also coming across as offensive. Werewolves in this game are so much less than they were in the other games, to the point where it's like kind of sad, to be honest with you, and I don't like it. They can be cured by purchasing a lycanthropic bee potion from the obedience trainer or the matchmaker. They cannot pass the condition to their children genetically. So if a werewolf sim has a baby, it's going to be a human sim. It's going to be a non-occult sim every time. Just like zombies. So there is, again, I don't know how much of this is like the levels in which the occults have like died off, I guess, like genetically, or how much of it has to do with interfering with science, with possibly being experimented on because of the being villainized and being ostracized, because it was 50-50 beforehand. In the other Sims games, it was 50-50. If there was a human and a werewolf sim having a baby, there was a 50-50 chance. If it was 2 werewolves, that's a definite werewolf baby. Now, it's not at all. We're going to go into vampires next, because vampires are next on the list, just in general, but also they're significantly smaller than what we've discussed before for vampires, which is weird because vampires have been a pretty standard occult throughout all of the other Sims games. So specifically added in Nightlife, I've said this, they were specifically added in Nightlife and the sub-neighborhood downtown. And if you don't have either the game downloaded or the downtown section like added to your neighborhood, Grandmaster vampires will not appear. All vampire sims, all of them, even if your sim is being turned into a vampire, all vampire sims will have bluish gray skin, red eyes, and fangs. Grand vampire NPCs wear Victorian style clothing. So you know a Grandmaster vampire when you see them, because they're very much looking old-timey. Which again, I also think is odd, because in all of the other previous games, occult sims have been in the same like timeline as non-occults that they live amongst. Is it their choice, or is it like you need to make sure that you're putting yourself out there as other when you go out and about? Vampirism is transmitted via neck bite interaction by a sim who is already a vampire. Vampires will not bite autonomously until a playable sim has been turned into one. And that is also not an autonomous thing. Sims can only become vampires if they're not already one by befriending a vampire and asking them to turn them. Which is maybe not necessarily a bad thing, but it's the fact that it's so restrictive now for vampires. Not that I agree with vampires going around just biting whoever the fuck and turning whoever the fuck, but it's the fact that it can only be done by Grandmaster vampires. You're not able to become a Grandmaster vampire if your sim turns into a vampire, and the vampire will not bite anybody unless your sim is like, give me the vampireness, give it to me. I've worked my ass off and socialized with you for 16 sim hours, turn me into a vampire. Only then will they autonomously bite people. But it's not always, I don't think it's a guarantee turn into a vampire. I could be wrong, but I don't remember in The Sims 2 it being a guarantee. It just means that they will then feel comfortable, I guess, to feed on other Sims. Vampires cease to age past adulthood, cannot die of starvation, even if their hunger is all the way down. And mind you, they only feed on plasma, so even if their hunger is all the way down, they cannot die of starvation. Blessing and a curse? Tied into one, I think. they will sizzle, smoke, and needs will plummet if they are in sunlight, and that's how they can die. They can die in sunlight. Vampirism can be cured by vampicillin. It's vampicillin D, purchasable from the matchmaker or brewable by witches. I think I do need to make a video on the matchmaker regardless of whether or not people want a video about the matchmaker, because the matchmaker seems to be in possession of a lot of the potions that otherwise seem to only be attainable by witches. So, like, who is the matchmaker? Who is the matchmaker? The memory of becoming a vampire is always positive, even if the sim feared becoming one. If Kenna has made a video specifically talking about werewolves, I have not seen it yet or paid much attention to it. It was probably like background noise. But Kenna has specifically spoken about, especially with Interview with a Vampire, has specifically talked about how vampires are usually... It's something about white men. I wish I could remember it off the top of my head. And if you don't follow Kenna on their various social medias, I suggest you do, especially on TikTok, where they talk about monsters and the histories of monsters and the representation in media. Vampires are like associated with white men and capitalism, I believe is what was said. So the fact that the memory of becoming a vampire, no matter what, even if your sim has a fear, is a positive one, but werewolf is negative. Something about that makes me uncomfortable. And I also think that in specifically the game aspect of it, in like the storyline we're going for, I think that shows that there's been like infighting. But I think it's infighting because of non-occult sims and where occults are now in the timeline of The Sims 2. I don't think that's necessarily like a natural or like expected thing out of the two occults. I think that's something that's been like taught to them, much like hate is taught to people. Now, originally I was going to talk about witches first and then aliens second, but there ended up being more information for witches than I kind of thought there would be for The Sims 2. So we're going to talk about aliens specifically first, because weirdly enough, in The Sims 2, I thought there was going to be more information. There's not as much information on aliens for The Sims 2, which is weird to me. A lot of the information for aliens on The Sims 2, specifically talking about like physical appearance and the fact that the inside of aliens' mouths in The Sims 2 is like a light blue, so there is a idea that that means they could be cold-blooded, blue-blooded. I think that's what I read. And then that shows that they are not Sims or human. They are more closely aligned with like insects and... oh, what's the other word? Cephalopods, I think was what they said. So that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't, I don't know, that didn't help me for like what I want to talk about, which is just occultness. So specifically aliens in The Sims 2, their base game, and one of the base game neighborhoods that you get is Strangetown. And Strangetown is a very small desert town. It is theorized that it's based off of Area 51. I don't think that was ever confirmed by the Sims creators, but it's very heavily theorized that it's based off of Area 51. There is a large crater that, again, it's theorized by the people in town could have been caused by a meteor, but there is, in fact, a crashed spaceship in the middle of the crater. A lot of the buildings are decommissioned military buildings. There's also an abandoned church that's been repurposed into I think it's the grocery store, and like you can get like a bookstore as well. So it seems like it was a town that at one point was some kind of military base. At some point there was a crash landing of an alien ship. And now who lives there is who lives there. And you got a cast of characters that live in Strangetown. If you don't know anything about Strangetown, we're not specifically going into like the depth of the town itself, but there's other videos. Like I said, Plumbella and Izzy's have made multiple videos. The Sims Lore has also made videos about Strangetown. I would recommend you go check out any of those. The first note I have about aliens is just shout out to pollination technician number 9, Smith. We love him. He's an icon. He is the moment. And then we get into it. At least to an outside observer, alien society appears to be structured in a way not unlike that of bees or ants, where individual aliens have roles parallels to functions within a hive. So the types of roles that aliens seem to have. Now, don't forget, in The Sims 2, or The Sims 3 and The Sims 1, it was said specifically on the Sims Wiki that they are not unlike Sims, but they are in fact not Sims. What we consider aliens, and we consider them not human, that is the exact same situation what's going on in the Sims world. The aliens in the Sims are not Sims. They're not occults. They're lumped in with occults, but they're not occults. They're not Sims. They are something other. I think culture is the right word. Within the alien culture, they have things called birth queens. They are central and seemingly only reproductive systems for aliens, except for the work of pollination technicians. So birth queens are the only way to produce aliens, essentially. We're going to get into pollination technicians, but for the hive, essentially, of aliens, whatever planet they live on, whether it's 6am or something else, birth queens are the only ways to produce more aliens. There are then colony drones, workers, but their specific work is unknown. It's assumed that it's just menial tasks, like just things that are required to keep the hive running. That's not reproduction, essentially. But we don't really know anything about colony drones because they're not specifically the ones that do the abducting. So they're kind of just there, but they are an integral part of the alien society because they're specifically listed and they have a specific title. There's also pollination technicians, perform the work of abducting and impregnating male Sims. They seem to be a recent phenomenon in alien society as there are no known pollination technicians that have bred with birth queens. So what is it? It's asexual? Shout out to all my asexuals out there. But in the sense of like biology, like breeding. I think it's like asexual. I think that's the word. That form of breeding, because pollination technicians there are no known pollination technicians to have bred with a birth queen. Pollination technicians specifically breed with human Sims. I don't know. I couldn't find anything on the Sims Wiki. I don't know if I wasn't looking in the right spot. But I don't know if pollination technicians have been created, because it says they're relatively new. Have created, have evolved, whatever you want to say, specifically to mate, to impregnate non-alien Sims. And if that is their specific reason for creation or evolution, why? Because the aliens are essentially non-existent in The Sims 1, but I don't think it's that they don't exist. I think it's that they're laying low. Because in The Sims 3, with the availability to abduct, and the fact that you could cause, what did I say? You could cause like an abduction, you could cause like extreme weather storms, which is like essentially like meteors falling from the fucking sky. There must have been something at some point where either they felt threatened and felt like they couldn't interact with non-alien Sims as much, or they simply were over it and done with it. And they were like, actually, this is boring. Let's go for a little while. Because now they've made a return 50 years later, which who knows how long that time or how short that time is for them in comparison to like Sim Nation. Time and space are different in different locations, yeah? It begs the question as to, like, was it them in The Sims 3 that caused kind of the problem, and that's why they weren't there? I don't know, man. Children of aliens, so, like, in alien culture, children are presumably taken away from their parents as evidenced by pollination technician number 9's lack of parental relationships. He does not have any memory of any parents, of any kind of anything from his childhood. He has familiar relationships with his wife and children and his friends on Earth on Sim Nation. But there's no memory and there's no family tree. I think there may only be a birth queen, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's genetically his mother. You feel me? Pollination technicians are allowed to retire from their assigned jobs, which is a very interesting thing because the plane crash the flying saucer crash, the UFO crash in the crater, could very well have been pollination technician number 9. I personally think that's what the UFO is. I don't think it's the Bella Goth abduction. Personally. Don't come at me. I don't think it's the Bella Goth abduction. I think it's pollination technician number 9 Smith. And I think him retiring, being allowed to retire to whatever planet he chose, was him going to his favorite planet. Actually, I think that was specifically confirmed on the Sims Wiki, but I think it's his flying saucer. I don't think it's the Bella abduction. Young aliens, regardless of gender, seem to be able to seek higher education, which places the roles of Birth Queen as an optional career choice, because there is an alien in The Sims 2 that has the option to have a career choice of Birth Queen. So even in Sim Nation, there's a chance to go right back to your roots. Aliens age at the same rate as Sims and seem to be slightly more resistant to heat, so that seems to be really the only, like, benefits when you're in Sim Nation of being an alien. There's not, like, crazy benefits. You're not getting a UFO that you can drive around. You're not weather resistant necessarily. You're just, like, slightly better at being hot. They are startlingly similar to Sims to the point that they can reproduce with others with no ill effects. However, if you woohoo with an alien sim or you get abducted by an alien sim and then you are then pregnant, their genes are dominant. There's like, I don't remember the exact numbers, but there's like a 80-20 chance that your sims will, your hybrid children will have a nose and not just like the slit that aliens have. Almost always will have the large black eyes and almost always will have the alien skin tone. There are very rare occurrences of the sim children that are hybrid mixes of an alien parent and a human parent not looking like their alien parent. Very, very few occurrences of that. All of their genetics are dominant. And I just have a note here. In aliens, recessive genes do not exist. It's just not a thing. The only other note I have for aliens is abductions are caused by 2 specific ways, and these are the only ways in The Sims 2. Through the telescope and the electric dance sphere, if previously abducted with a telescope. So only if you've been previously abducted. If you haven't been, don't worry about it. Of course, I'm doing the longest bit of this video for last, and I really got to get moving because we're running out of daylight here, people. So we're going to get into witches now, which, again, I didn't think we're going to have as much information in The Sims 2, but they have so much more information than the rest of the other cults in The Sims 2, even though, comparatively, they don't have the most information about witches in general. So Sims are only able to be witches from teens to elders. Again, children, toddlers, babies, in no way, shape, or form affected, even genetically. They must be turned by a witch to become one, and they must befriend a high witch and request to be taught the ways of light or darkness. Now, think about that specifically. Taught by a high witch, not just a witch, a high witch, a witch in a top position. Restrictions are applied to witches, which we said in The Sims 3 are the most powerful and in-depth of the occults. What was that, like, head movement I just did? I don't know. I'm making myself dizzy, though. Once turned, witches can purchase reagents as well as new cauldron and spellbook. They can only purchase those things once they're turned. You do not have access to them before you are a witch. To cure a witch, they must drink the Witch Begone E-potion after crafting it or purchasing it from a high witch. So the matchmaker does not have access to the Witch Begone potion. I was going to call it a serum. They do not have access to that potion. High witches do, though. And other witches that can brew potions have access to it. Now, the witches in The Sims 2 have a very interesting kind of vibe. Kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? I guess rule. They have a very specific set of rules and restrictions for themselves, whether self-implemented or implemented by others, non-occults. They have alignments in The Sims 2, where in past games, there was a mix of spells. Some that were like fairly neutral, some that were beneficial, some that were specifically harmful to the target or like the world around them. Now it is very specifically, you can only be a good witch, be a bad witch, or be a neutral witch. It's very specific alignments. And again, I talked about the sub-neighborhood magic at the beginning of this section, where there's a Fortress of Light and a Fortress of Darkness. The Fortress of Light has the high good witch. The Fortress of Darkness has the high evil witch. They both have thrones as well that are very specific to light versus dark. And if a good witch sits on the throne of darkness, her needs plummet and her lifetime happiness plummet, and vice versa. So now there's infighting, and there's a clear distinction between your type of alignment that honestly I think encourages the infighting. So part of me thinks that's not the witches themselves, which again applies to the theory I have where witches and aliens are the main reason why occults are so villainized and ostracized. Again, whether through their own actions and behaviors or they're seen as the most powerful and the most threatening, so non-occults focused on them. That's what I mean by that. So let's get into the alignments. Good witches, casting even more good spells will turn a witch into infallibly good, which also kind of gives me the ick. I don't really like that. Appearances will change to blue aura, around you, and gold sparkles on their skin. Good spells are intended to improve other Sims' lives or their environment. So very visibly don't worry, I'm a good one cues here. The spells that a good witch can have, they can cast a spell that gives you clear and sunny weather with no bugs. They can also summon butterflies, very cutesy things. They can instantly extinguish fire. They can cure sickness. They can successfully eject the Grim Reaper and save a Sim's life, which I think is really dope. And I think the Grim Reaper would also be a very interesting character to make a video out of, because I don't necessarily think he's a cult. I don't necessarily think he's alien. I don't necessarily think he's human. I think he's a separate fourth thing, which is really cool. I don't know. I don't have too many thoughts about it, but I don't think he's anything. I think a Grim Reaper is just a Grim Reaper. So the fact that a witch can successfully eject him is very cool. Now, I will talk about the one that goes with the evil alignment as well, but the good witches and evil witches have very specific spells that both of them can cast that are the opposite of each other, but also, I think, are the opposite of the witch. And I think this is one that kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies, makes me kind of scared. Good witches can cast a spell at level 5 which influences a sim to accept the next 5 social interactions. And that doesn't sound like a bad thing, right? You're trying to talk to a sim and befriend them, but they're getting antsy and you can't get them to just sit down and talk to you, or somebody you're trying to romance. In a gameplay perspective, I understand that. In the world of the Sims and the lore and the storyline, I think that's kind of sinister. Because what if you are a sim that's intending to do somebody harm? You could be a good witch, but that doesn't mean you're a good sim. That doesn't mean you're a good person. Just because your magic is good doesn't mean your intentions are. So what if you cast that spell on somebody, but then were mean to them for the next 5 interactions and they can't escape you or deny you? What if it was a creep trying to flirt with somebody? Somebody creepy and weird was trying to flirt with a sim that didn't want to be flirted with anymore, but now they can't reject your advances? That's icky. I don't like that. Then, for objects, they have a fairy fire floor lamp, which is the only time we see the word fairy specifically in The Sims 2, which I think is interesting, because where are you getting this fairy fire? Did you attack a fairy for it? Is that why fairies are in hiding? Stardust wall sconce and star-dusted ceiling lamp. My other question, where are you getting the stardust? Is it from the aliens? Are you in cahoots? If you are, slay, but... And also the Throne of Light, which I talked about. Evil witches, not evil Sims, evil witches. Casting more evil spells will turn you into atrociously evil. Appearance will change to green skin and sickly green aura. In parentheses, they do not die when doused with water because, yes, it is an Easter egg about Wicked. I don't know if that's confirmed, but it's like kind of fucking obvious. You know what I mean? Evil spells ruin other Sims' lives. So the spells that they can cast, they can summon thunder and lightning and also spawn rodents anytime you're at a community lot in The Sims 2 and suddenly it starts fucking raining and your game lags like crazy. It's because an evil witch has showed up and said Baharmony Gluchnar and cast a fucking spell on you where there's roaches. They can possess a targeted Sim to act like a chicken, okay? They can set objects on fire. They can make Sims throw up. They can erase memories and relationship settings, which is crazy. That one's kind of scary. They can break up a Sim and their spouse. They can resurrect a dead Sim as a zombie, which we've talked about. But now this is the one that I said is opposite of the good witch, but I think good witches should have this one and bad witches should have this one. Evil witches, sorry, evil bad. And is it interchangeable? Not always. But in The Sims, I think so. Evil witches can influence a Sim to reject the next 5 social interactions. Now, there's, how do I say this without it being like, I keep bringing in real world implications. So the real world implication that there is a difference between being rude and being just like having boundaries, I think. I think if you personally feel uncomfortable or you just don't want to, you are allowed to not talk to people if you really don't want to. There's negatives and positives to things like that. However, you are under, like realistically, you are under no obligation to talk to somebody if you don't want to. So I don't think it's a bad thing or an evil thing to be able to influence a Sim to reject the next 5 social interactions, because you could be an evil witch, but if you see a Sim being very heavily flirted with and they're clearly uncomfortable, you can then cast a spell on them to be like, you've rejected it. Because sometimes people are people pleasers and sometimes Sims are people pleasers, and it happens, especially when you play them as people pleasers. Anyway, I don't think that's an evil spell. I think both of those maybe should be neutral because they can have positives and benefit, like positive and negative, like implications and also just like outcomes. Personal opinion. The objects you get from being an evil witch are the Hand of Darkness floor lamp, sconce, and like a wall lamp, I think are the things, and the Claw of Darkness throne. So a little less impressive and a little less implication-y. Because again, fairy fire lamp and star dust. What you doing with the maybe the good witches are the evil ones in The Sims 2. Do we need to look into that? We might have to look into that. However, there's the third type of witch that you can have, which is a neutral witch. The only known visible difference between a neutral witch and normal Sims is a tiny transparent gold sparkle behind their right ear, which can't be easily seen. So you would have no idea if you were walking around with a neutral witch, because once a Sim, any of the witches can change out of the robes they're given, but once they've changed out of the robes, neutral witches look like the rest of us. So there could be neutral witches everywhere. I'm a neutral witch. I always played as a neutral witch in The Sims 2. That's me. I'm the neutral witch. Neutral spells are either beneficial to the caster or other Sims around them. So there's not really too much negative going on there. Spells that you can cast as a neutral witch, you can remove puddles and leaves, so like just clean up an area. You can teleport, you could summon food, you can banish a Sim from a lot, so like if you have like an unsavory charlatan, that's the word, on the lot and you just don't want to deal with that shit, you can banish them from the lot. You can summon a familiar if you have pets, so like your little cat friends. You can summon a Sim, be like, hey bitch, I need to talk to you, come over here. You can dispel magical effects, so if another witch casts some kind of something, you can be like, no, time for that to go away. You can turn a Sim into a witch, so that's what being a neutral witch has for you. So high witches of the good or evil alignment can turn Sims into witches, but as a neutral witch, you can also turn Sims into witches, which I think is really cool. I think neutral witches deserve a little bit more out here because they don't have a lot in the magic sub-neighborhood. Also, neutral witches can freeze time. That's kind of scary. Not gonna lie, that's a level 10 spell. That's essentially being a high witch for neutral witches, even though there is no high witch for neutral witches, and you can freeze time. Where's my lot in magic? Where is it? Because if I can freeze time, I deserve a special lot. Also, the only object you can get as a neutral witch is a Little Miss Wendelin sculpture. That's not fair. Why don't I can freeze time. Give me a throne. Now, the thing with witches is, again, very similar to The Sims 1, but it's not all Sims need material to be able to cast spells, even if they're not witches. Witches need specific materials to cast spells, point blank, period. The types of materials you need, the reagents you need, they can be crafted with a cauldron or specifically bought from a high witch. So they are very limited. You can only access them if you are already a witch. So now at least it's not... I don't know if this is maybe the right way of saying it. With The Sims 1, it was almost like people could appropriate the culture of witches because it was like anybody could do it as long as they had the right materials. But now it's to the point of like maybe the witches are like, not gatekeeping, but like that, for lack of a better word, maybe it's to the point where witches are like, we're going to gatekeep our shit because people are trying to kill us. Like, I don't know. You have to use reagents, and they are dragon scales, mystic dust, crystallized moonbeams, essence of light, viper essence, and eye of newt. So those are the reagents that are required for you to be able to cast spells as a witch, which are only accessible for witches. I don't know how fucking long this video is, but we are at the end of this video. So that was not the history of magic, but looking at magic and occults and aliens throughout the Sims franchise and throughout the canonical like lore timeline, and kind of seeing how the occults started and how they ended up. Because The Sims 2 is the end of the Sims timeline. Again, we're not fucking getting into The Sims 4. It's on an alternate timeline. We're not doing it. But that is the end of the Sims timeline. And it's a 50-year difference between The Sims 3 and The Sims 2. So I don't know realistically, like I don't think I've proven it for myself. Like even through this research, I don't think I have a definitive answer. Maybe you have a definitive answer now. And again, if you have any more information or like any of you have looked at anything or seen anything that I missed, please let me know in the comments, reach out to me on any of my social medias. But again, my theory was that maybe witches and aliens, whether through their own actions or through their perceived levels of power from non-occults, are the main reason why occults are so criminalized and like disregarded and segregated throughout the Sims timeline. But I still don't know if I've proven that theory right. It is just kind of a working theory. It was never for sure, and this is not specifically a theory video. It is more just looking at the history and the capabilities of occult Sims and seeing how far they've kind of fallen, which is such a shame when you think about it, because again, real world implications, it has a lot of like parallels to real world implications and like things that have happened throughout history, usually specifically caused by white people, carried out by white people. But besides the point, we went from a world, literally a world, its own established government, military, schooling systems, everything, of Moonlit Falls, where occults just live among us. Aliens just live among us. It's just the norm. Like, people are still prejudiced and mean, but it's just the norm. It's not like they're so completely other to non-occult Sims that it's seen as like a danger or like scary or like, whoa, I've never seen one of those before, to occult Sims being so devolved or non-existent or essentially hostile that they're so othered, they're so segregated, they're so separate from how they were before. And in The Sims 1, where we had specific regulation with the Magic Man, that the Magic Man still gets me, because I wish they had kind of implemented something similar in The Sims 2 with like the actual game mechanics and everything. But the Magic Man being a regulator, especially with spells, and if you're doing any kind of magic like outside of Magic Town, he comes and finds your ass, to now witches only having access to things if they are witches. There is no other, like, the fucking people are appropriating my culture over here, but at least I can pick up some reagents on a Tuesday afternoon. No. They have to go out of their way, go above and beyond to have any access to any of their abilities. Which you cannot be born as a witch in The Sims to, but once you're a witch, it is like a natural magical ability, and you can't even readily access it. You have to go out of your way to get things. From werewolves being just like your neighbors to being specifically a dog that bites you, to fairies being, again, just like a neighbor and having somewhere in town specifically they can go, the Arboretum that has like all of the benefits and all of their plant friends, to essentially being non-existent or their bloodlines being so weak that you can't even detect it. Vampires feel kind of standard, and I think that has just more to do with the actual gameplay than it does with like the storyline and lore, where vampires seem kind of standard, but they still are victims of like the being ostracized, because they go from kind of living in like broader communities and associating with occults and non-occults both, to seemingly kind of staying in their lane, for lack of a better term, of just kind of like staying in cities, which I think is very interesting that vampires are in cities, and I'm sure there's maybe like a cultural reference or something to that. But the way I look at it is cities are very easy to like blend into versus like being just like walking around Pleasant View. Like small towns, people will know that you're a vampire, and small towns, small minds, like that kind of idea. But like in New York City, like maybe the guy above me is a vampire, who fucking knows, but he only makes noise at night when I'm trying to sleep, and I hate that guy. Like a very like New Yorker kind of mindset, I guess. So I don't know, if you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a like and let me know in the comments, and maybe tag Plumbella and Izzy's, because like I said, huge fan of them. But this was just my look into it, because other Sims creators like Plumbella, when she touched about it in the iceberg, have talked about like magic criminalization and everything, but I wanted to really look into it and see if I could figure out why. And I still don't think I know for sure, and I don't know if there is any confirmation or any research that I might have missed, or like any access on the Sims wiki that like would tell us, but I still don't think there's a definitive answer as to why magic and occults and aliens are so criminalized. We're missing huge chunks of information in the 25-year time skips between each game. And I wonder if maybe this video will help other people figure it out, because maybe I'm missing things from like The Sims Medieval. Like Plumbella did an entire history of like the land grab family, and I've seen other like history of the land grab families, and they've been around since The Sims Medieval. So they very well could have been around since before the medieval times. So maybe like occult stuff has been around since then, and that would give us answers as to like maybe history repeating itself. Like, I don't know. But this was a very fun video to make. It was very long. It was very exhausting, but this was a very fun video to make. And I've wanted to make this video since before I did my video about H2O. And I really hope that I did it justice. So again, please leave a like if you enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments what you thought, or if you have any additional thoughts, anything like that. I don't know what else to say, so I'm going to turn it off here. But again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!